cut is bad enough, but an unplanned power cut can be really quite devastating.
So, I mean, why do you think the government is at the moment ruling out any idea of a public information campaign? Because just if every one of us turned the lights off that we don't need and took other energy-saving advice, it would make a big difference, wouldn't it?
That's right. I mean, I think the government is saying, firstly, the price is making us take energy a lot more seriously anyway, and that's certainly true. I think many people are really looking at their wastage of energy, and that's an entirely good thing. But I think there's also an ideological thing about not being a nanny state. And that's really, in my mind, not what this is about. Some things, like you say, switching off lights are obvious, and you probably don't need a public information film around it. But pointing out to people that, for example, the best temperature for your thermostat might be around, I don't know, whatever figure fits the things, but say 19 or 20 degrees. That's not self-evident to everybody. And putting that sort of information around, saying the house will be warm enough at those levels, but you will save a considerable amount of energy, both for your bills and for the national demand. That seems to me, as I say, something that countries all over the world are doing at the moment in partnership with their populations. And I think the government's view of saying we don't want to talk down to people, that, to my mind, isn't what we're talking about here. It's a partnership. We're facing a very serious national position that affects us as individuals and as a country. And it seems to me perfectly sensible that the government should forge that partnership with the people to make sure we've all got the best information available, so we protect our own bills, our own power supplies at home, and the national power supply by not using energy when we don't need to.
OK, Malcolm, good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us so early. Thanks very much. What do you think? GBviews at gbnews.uk. Do we need to be told this?
Yes.
Or is it sensible? Is it just sort of common sense now?
Yes, but
don't we know it?
But campaigns sometimes, even though they're underlining the obvious, they give you a sense of doing your bit, don't they?
But they cost millions of pounds.
They don't cost millions. They really don't cost millions to do a public information. I've done a public information campaign. 2 million it cost then, and that was back in the 90s. But you know, it doesn't cost that much to have somebody just give a basic message. Switch your lights off when you're not in the room, do this, do that, do the next thing, we're all in it together sort of thing. It doesn't have to be nanny state-ish. I just wonder why our governments are always so worried about being nanny state-ish when actually something actually could be, you know, we could all be in it together and doing something. I bet we could save an awful lot of power if we all did our bit.
Yeah, well, are you prepared to do it? Will you pay attention? We'll try and inform you as best as we can.
We didn't say nanny state when we were told, you know, to look right and left before you cross the road and click every trip. God help us. We presented that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You know, it worked. It got everybody moving in the right direction. Why not?
Oh well, do let us know what you think. GBviews at gbnews.uk.
Now, here's an interesting one. Prince Harry, Sir Elton John and quite a lot of other big celebrity names are suing the publishers of the Daily Mail, the Mail on Sunday and Mail Online.
Now, the legal action claims to have compelling evidence of gross breaches of privacy by Associated Newspapers, the publisher.
Yeah, well, they've responded to the allegations, describing them as preposterous smears.
Let's talk to showbiz reporter Kinsey Schofield, who joins us now. Kinsey, morning to you. I mean, this has the potential to be a huge case.
Absolutely. This is a milestone case. This is one of the biggest, most influential newspapers. I mean, I know it is in the UK, but people read the Daily Mail all over the world religiously. It's what you do, the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning. I do think that it's significant that we see so many celebrities listed. However, I don't know if you were curious about this, but I was really interested in Doreen Lawrence, the fact that Doreen Lawrence is also involved in this case. Now, her son, Stephen Lawrence, was murdered in the late 90s, and the Daily Mail actually took a lot of heat for putting who they claimed murdered her son on the cover of their paper. A lot of people were criticizing them because they were saying trial by media. Years later, two of those individuals were actually arrested for his murder. But this is a newspaper that campaigned for Doreen and Doreen Lawrence's son, justice for her son. So I was really interested by that name on the list. I expect Prince Harry, he's very litigious, but having names like Elton John and Doreen certainly help his case.
Yeah, I mean, Doreen Lawrence, and I know the newspapers published some very invasive stories about her own marriage years after they became news, sadly. So it's about invasion of relationships as well. You notice that Elton John and David Furnish, his husband, they are both suing the Daily Mail. Elizabeth Hurley, too, Sadie Frost. These are people whose names have been in the public eye for some time, but there have always been salacious stories. And now we gather that there may be a chance that some of these stories were gained by, things like home invasion, actually putting bugs in people's homes, breaking into cars, things like that. That's apparently what's involved.
Not just that, but lying about their position, their profession, so they could get access to financial records and medical records. These are very serious accusations, but like you said in your intro, the Daily Mail stresses that this is not true, that they have their hands are clean, but they're going to have to go into the dock and defend themselves. And I think the whole world will be watching.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Kinsey, thank you very much indeed. Good to talk to you this morning. It is worth reiterating that the Mail and associated newspapers denies the allegations being made against them, but of course have to follow that.
But it is big, as Kinsey was saying there. The Mail Online is the biggest, most read online newspaper ever. It's astonishing. I mean, as far as the Mail Online is concerned, it's an incredibly successful outlet for news.
No one would want to bug my house.
Don't say that. You never know.
It would be very dull. Be very dull. They soon get very bored. they turn the mics off.
I hope so.
Now, the Prime Minister has called on European leaders to unite on energy and economy amid the escalating Russian aggression.
Yeah, Liz Truss has also urged the group to address the fundamental causes of energy and migration challenges and strengthened relationships with French President Emmanuel Macron, who she called a friend now. So she's changed her mind, because when she was asked before during the leadership campaign whether was he friend or foe, she said jury's still out on that. Yes.
Anyway, they're going to work together to tackle migration, apparently. Well, let's head to Prague and talk to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Morning to you, Darren. What did you make of what the Prime Minister had to say last night?
Yeah, really fascinating. Firm friends, again, as you say, between Emmanuel Macron and Liz Truss. The Entente Cordiale is back in business. And it is a sign, I think, actually, of really good Anglo-French relations that have been built up really relatively quickly between Emmanuel Macron and Liz Truss over the last month or so. This was the second meeting they had. They met back in New York last month. And it does follow those comments during the summer, which Liz Truss seemed to suggest that question was open to question. Well, not anymore. There is going to be a French UK summit next summer. The Interior Ministers, i.e. the Home Secretary in the UK and the Interior Minister in France, are now working together on what we're told is an ambitious package to try and sort out the migration crisis, because clearly the government, yet again, have realised that in order to try and ease that small boat crisis in the English Channel, they do frankly need the cooperation of the French. Now, there has been frustration in the past that France has not gone far enough, but clearly this can only be dealt with if there is French cooperation. And also there's going to be cooperation as well on nuclear power. We've been talking about energy this morning, haven't we? Clearly the British government feel that yes, this winter is going to be difficult, but what they do not want is a repeat in the years and years to come. And that is why they're trying to sign these energy deals with different companies and countries in the long term to ensure there is no repetition. And that just doesn't involve Norway in gas. It also involves France potentially being involved in nuclear energy at Sizewell C and elsewhere in the country. So, as I say, the Entente Cordiale is back. It is quite extraordinary in many regards, the change in tone towards Europe, to the point where actually Liz Truss has suggested, and it's been accepted, that the UK will host one of these European political community events in 2024. And also, it must be said, it seems in the last 24 hours or so, and again we've been hinted at this, haven't we, Stephen and Anne, over the last couple of weeks, that there's some pretty good noise has been made around the Northern Ireland Protocol as well. The Irish government suggesting that there could be compromises, that maybe the protocol's been a little bit too harsh. So the mood music actually on the continent on a whole range of issues is pretty positive. The problem, of course, for Liz Truss is she's returning back to the UK where the mood music within her own party is not quite as good. Kind of politics upended somewhat.
OK. Darren, for now, thank you.
It certainly is upended when you think that things are warmer inside Europe at the moment than they are at home. Shall we speak to the Chief Executive of the European Policy Centre, Fabian Zulig? A very good morning. Thanks very much for joining us so early. How do you read the mood music in Europe at the moment?
I think the mood music towards the UK certainly has improved. We're seeing there's a lot more dialogue. There are positive signs, in particular on the Northern Ireland Protocol. So overall, we are in a better place at this moment. The question is now, will it be followed up by real progress?
Interesting. The relationships with the UK are sort of improving somewhat, because there doesn't seem to be, on the big strategic issues at least, a tremendous amount of unity within the EU.
Well, I think there are a number of extremely difficult challenges which are facing all European countries, including the UK. And there have to be a number of difficult discussions around issues such as energy, where we're all struggling. So in the end, I think having this summit, having this possibility for leaders to exchange, to try to find ways of first communicating better and then coordinating better, I think is a good thing.
And is it all, do you think, is this new Entente Cordiale really fuelled by Russia's aggression in Ukraine?
Well, clearly that is the driver behind it. That's why we have a real need to come together on issues such as energy. But I think there's a broader picture here. Despite Brexit, clearly there are shared interests between the European Union and the UK. There are shared interests also between individual countries in the UK, as we've seen in the Entente between France and the UK. So it is very important that we see the bigger picture, that we see there are global challenges we have to face together. Just to mention climate change as one of the other big challenges where we need to work together regardless of what the political arrangements are between the EU and the UK.
We shall see, won't we? Fabian Zulig, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you.
It is 6:22. Let's bring you up to date with what's going on today. The Prime Minister has ruled out launching an energy-saving public information campaign. That's despite warnings that planned blackouts could hit the UK this winter if power plants can't source enough gas to keep running. It's understood the Business Secretary supports the campaign. It costs £15 million, apparently, which could see households being advised to turn off radiators in empty rooms, amongst other things. The Times reports the idea was blocked by Number 10.
Meanwhile, the government has opened a new licensing round for oil and gas exploration in the North Sea. That's the first since 2019. As many as 100 licences could be granted, and the Business Secretary again says it will boost the UK's economy, energy security and support skilled jobs.
The UK and Ireland have said they'll work to try to resolve the stalemate over the Northern Ireland Protocol. The Foreign Secretary met his Irish counterpart last night, with the pair discussing their mutual desire for action. The first bilateral meeting between the UK and Ireland since Liz Truss became Prime Minister will be followed by the British-Irish Intergovernmental Conference later on.
And Hollywood actor Brad Pitt is expected to respond in court to allegations of abuse made by his ex-wife, Angelina Jolie. It follows a recent US legal filing by Jolie in which she claims Pitt was verbally and physically abusive towards her and their children in September 2016. Pitt's lawyer claims he's being misrepresented.
Retailers have seen their slowest sales growth since shops reopened after the pandemic. A survey from advisory firm BDO says it's due to the worsening cost of living crisis. It said like-for-like sales in September increased by 2.8% year on year.
And don't forget to keep your tips coming in on how to keep the spark in a relationship. We'll be talking about it a bit later. But this doctor, or she's a health and libido expert. Or
Yes,
something.
love and libido.
Love and libido expert in America.
Only in America.
Gone viral with her 5 top tips on how to keep the spark in a relationship. I'll tell you number 1 in a few minutes' time, Sean.
We keep our spark going, don't we?
We do, don't we? Actually, yes. I wonder if there's ever rules apply to us. But she says basically, if you keep to those 5 rules, you know, you've got the recipe for a successful partnership.
Yeah, there you go. We'll reveal all.
Tell you what, shall I tell you what number 5 is?
Oh, go on.
Number 5 is don't criticise each other.
Yeah. Oh, well, we don't do that.
No, we don't actually.
No. You see, this is a sort of on-screen husband and wife.
Yeah.
Never thought you'd get married again, did you? To me, anyway.
No. But, yeah, all right, number 5 is don't criticise your partner. Now, that might be very difficult, you know, in life's everyday what's-its, but apparently it's key. And I'd certainly agree with that.
There you go. Let us know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Time now for the People's Poll.
Moment of high drama there.
Isn't it just?
Yeah.
Let's talk to academic and professor of politics Matt Goodwin, who's behind the polling for us this week. Well, every week. Matt, morning to you. So, what are the key questions you've been asking this week?
Yeah, well, the first, Stephen, is how are the parties doing? And obviously we're coming off the back of the all-important conference season where we saw some pretty remarkable stuff, actually. On the one hand, we saw Labour doing pretty well, seemed united, seemed focused on the next election. On the other hand, we saw Liz Truss's premiership coming a little bit apart, the breakdown of cabinet discipline, open criticism. And we see that in the polls this week, Stephen. The Labour Party has a 32-point lead over the Conservatives. So things haven't really changed since before the events this week. If anything, they've got a little bit worse for the Conservatives. And just to drill that down, Stephen, one of the fascinating points about this for me is that today Liz Truss and the Conservatives are only holding about 40% of the people who voted for Boris Johnson in 2019. The rest have gone walkies, 17% or so to Labour, a much larger number now saying, actually, they don't know who they're going to vote for.
We also asked them, didn't we, who should be responsible for the current economic turmoil in the UK? And what did they think?
Yeah, well, this was a really interesting question because obviously whether voters blame the government versus international events is ultimately going to define Liz Truss's premiership. And surprisingly, even though we know, as you've just been talking about with your guests, that much of this is being driven by international events, the British public actually now don't really see it that way. 44% blame Liz Truss and the government for the current problems, 26% blame global events such as the war in Ukraine, and a much smaller number, 9%, blame energy companies. Why does this matter? It matters because if people are blaming the incumbent government for what is happening, then it's going to be very difficult for the government to try and reassert a sense of competence and control over this issue because it's constantly now at the mercy of these international winds. So this is to me at least, this is a red flag for Liz Truss and Number 10. And they're going to have to, I think, do a much better job at communicating to the British public what is going on and what is causing this crisis.
It's interesting because, you know, I mean, polls are about opinion, but this is in effect the opinion which shows that people aren't understanding the facts of all of this.
Well, it shows, I think, that, again, you know, we've had this discussion over the last 10 days about communication. Has Liz Truss framed her premiership in the best way possible? Has she explained why she's going for growth? Has she explained why people's energy bills and interest rates on their mortgages are rising? And I think this will come back to be seen as the big mistake at the start of this premiership. And had she come out of Number 10 Downing Street and explained this on day one, this is what I'm going to do and why I'm going to do it, I think actually the British public would probably be giving her a bit more of the benefit of the doubt at the moment. The other thing, just briefly, Stephen and Anne, that we asked, which relates to a story last week, you will have seen the new head of the Metropolitan Police talking about how he wanted police officers not to be so openly political And I thought, well, this is a good question to ask. And we asked it, should police officers remain politically neutral at times, or should they be allowed to make political gestures, such as taking the knee? And we've all seen the TikTok videos. We've seen the social media videos of police being quite political. We find the overwhelming majority of people, almost 60%, say they want the police to stay politically neutral. Only a very small minority, 16%, think that police should be allowed to make political gestures. And this, I think, is really important, not just about the police, it's about all of our public bodies. I think people don't want their police organisations, the NHS, other organisations becoming openly political and displaying political themes.
And we also asked about an early general election. How do people think on the idea of another general election sooner than 2 years?
Yeah, well, this was an interesting one because I wasn't sure where the public were going to go on this. On the one hand, everybody's sort of fed up with the state of the country. They're angry, I think, with the government. And so you could perhaps then expect to find, very widespread support for a new election. Actually, what we find is that 49% of all voters say they would support calls for a new general election. 14% would oppose those calls. Now, obviously, when you drill down into the data and you look at different party supporters, unsurprisingly, you find that Labour voters, Lib Dem voters, Remain voters are overwhelmingly supportive of calls for a general election. Conservative voters less so. Will Liz Truss call one? I suspect not. I think the strategy in number 10 is buckle in and get through the winter and hope and pray for some signs of economic growth in 2023 that will then take them into that crunch 24 general election. But at the moment, we're not seeing a big clamour for a fresh election among the British public overall.
No, that's interesting. I'll tell you what was obviously a big issue of debate at conference was what should happen with benefits, whether they should rise in line with inflation or not. A lot of people getting in touch with us saying, well, why should benefits sort of rise with inflation when other jobs aren't? That money isn't rising with inflation, obviously. What have people said about that?
Well, I think you're absolutely right to point to this issue, Stephen. It's going to become the next big dispute within the Truss premiership. I imagine this is one of those issues where, were it to come to Parliament, actually there would be a very big rebellion on the Conservative benches around this issue. It's a little bit like the 45% tax rate. It's just one of those lightning issues that is going to cause a big political furore. And what we find nationally, if you ask all voters, they actually agree, 57% of them agree that benefits should increase in line with inflation, 16% disagreeing, 11% neither agreeing nor disagreeing. But there are, of course, as I said earlier on, some pretty big variations that I think your viewers will probably relate to. Labour, Liberal Democrat, Remain voters, much more supportive of benefits increasing in line with inflation. Conservatives, only a minority think they should. 47% say, yeah, let's increase benefits in line with inflation. So I think, this again is one of those issues that could come to define the early weeks and months of the Truss premiership. She's going to have to walk pretty carefully on it. There's also going to be the small boats issue. Keep your eyes on Suella Braverman and what's coming out of the Home Office in the next few weeks. I think that's lining up to be a big dispute between our new Home Secretary and the Prime Minister. So there's lots going on, lots to poll, and always interested to hear people's views.
Yeah, and we've just seen pictures of Sir Keir Starmer there, who would love a general election tomorrow. What did the people that we polled think of the idea of a general election tomorrow?
Yeah, well, I mean, as I said, I think we're not seeing massive amounts of support for a fresh general election. Just under half of the country say they would support calls for a general election. Obviously, Labour would be very supportive. The reason for that, of course, is if you look at our polling numbers, Labour having a 32-point lead, you're really looking at a scenario at that election that we've not seen since 1997. And some of your viewers, like yourselves and me, will remember what happened at that 97 general election. It was a complete wipeout for the Conservative Party. And if the Conservatives were to poll what we currently have them on, which is the early 20s, around 20% to 22% over the last couple of weeks, this would be the lowest share of the vote at any general election in modern British history.
Crikey.
Oh, interesting times, that's for sure. Matt, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. If you've got a view on any of that, get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. And particularly that last one, would you actually vote? 56% say so. I wonder what the turnout would be.
Yeah, but that's how people feel now. That's the thing with polling, isn't it? If they announced a general election, it would take a couple of months to get there, wouldn't it? By which time we'd been debating other things, and you would probably feel more motivated to vote in the way that you felt.
Because polls always tighten.
Yeah.
When there's an
they certainly
election.
do. Yes.
So, but would they?
But I mean,
tighten
people
up?
saying yes, we'd love a general election as soon as. I'm not sure whether. Do we really want that again? It's just been through that leadership election.
But it would stop things happening. I think that's
it
the
would,
thing.
yes, and the country ground to a halt, more or less, during the leadership election, didn't it?
So,
can we afford for that to happen? When we need good leadership now.
Maybe an election if you're desperate for an election, maybe call for one in the spring rather than now.
Yeah, that must be a problem for the people wondering when to designate a date for the coronation.
Yes.
Because they've got to fit all of these things in, haven't they? I wonder if the palace is actually even talking to Number 10 now about dates. You can't have a general election at the same time as a coronation, can you?
No.
They're talking about the coronation being June the 2nd. Nobody has confirmed that, but, the buzz is June the 2nd, or certainly very early in June. That would give us enough time to get over a winter of disconnect or discontent. But maybe not if there was a general election looming.
We shall see. 2023, it's a whole new year. Who
Yes,
knows what's going to happen?
Oh, yes.
Oh, dear. Anyway, look, we've got much more to come for you in a couple of minutes, including the lawyer who's got advice for mortgage owners who are worried about the rising interest rates.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Spell of heavy rain moving south through the day today. Either side of that, there'll be some sunny spells, but there'll be some gusty winds too. That spell of rain, courtesy of this weather front slowly sinking its way south. It's making for a pretty wet start out there this morning. Parts of southern Scotland and Northern Ireland, and fairly smartly spreading now into parts of northern England too. It's a fairly lively weather front, so some quite heavy bursts of rain, and it'll push into parts of North Wales, northwest England by the end of the morning. Behind that, brighter skies for eastern Scotland, plenty of showers for western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Further south, 1 or 2 showers, but much of East Anglia and the southeast will be dry for most of the day. Another pretty mild day here as well, despite the breeze 18 or 19. But this narrow band of rain pushes across the Midlands, southwest England later on. Not lasting too long, but it could be pretty intense, and it will be around across East Anglia and the southeast for this evening's rush hour. So just bear that in mind if you're heading away this Friday evening. It does clear through, and then many places having clear spells tonight. There'll be some showers keeping going in western Scotland, and some coming in from the Irish Sea into northwest England. But the winds ease off overnight as well. That will allow it to turn quite chilly, actually, a colder night than the one just gone. We're down into single figures for most to start the weekend. So a fresh start on Saturday, but by and large, a sunny start. There will be through the day a few showers coming into western Scotland, maybe the odd one for Northern Ireland, northwest England too. But actually for most places, looking like a decent day tomorrow with sunny spells for the majority, and temperatures after a chilly start getting up to about average come the afternoon, generally into the teens. So the weekend mostly starting dry and fine, and certainly for most of England and Wales it will stay that way into Sunday as well. But we are looking at a change with outbreaks of rain coming into parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
It's 6:40 morning to you watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Yeah, we're talking about the cost of living crunch at the moment and how you're going to get by and whether you're thinking of energy usage. And one thing maybe you are thinking about is Christmas decorations. I mean, I know there are LED lights nowadays, aren't they?
Very low energy.
But can you still get excited about Christmas decorations?
I think we
this year?
need the fun of it, don't we? We need something to look forward to, and getting those lights out cheers us all up a little bit.
I bought some new ones at the weekend. They're ones that go like that.
Yeah.
Give the illusion of falling snow.
You've got to put...
But they would be LED, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they're LED.
So they wouldn't take up
They're
too
not going
much
to cost a lot of
electricity.
money. No.
You've been out bauble shopping. Come on, you're meant to confess.
They have bauble
shopping. Been bauble shopping.
Can't help it. Well, I'm looking forward to it. I need something to look forward
yes, you do.
to.
The next thing's Christmas.
So there you go. Meanwhile, what's going on with the mortgages? That's another issue, isn't it? Britain's biggest lenders are pressing the Chancellor for an extension of the government's mortgage guarantee scheme.
But the worry is homeowners with mortgages might face unaffordable double-digit interest rates in the years to come.
Well, as millions face rising interest rates, there are a group of borrowers trapped in unaffordable mortgages, and lawyer Olivia Selly is here to tell us more. Morning to you.
Good morning.
So what is going on with these unaffordable mortgages?
Well, so the group of borrowers that you're referring to there is a group of borrowers called mortgage prisoners. And they are people who are trapped paying excessive rates of interest on their mortgages. They were really created in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, the main example being the collapse of Northern Rock. When that bank collapsed, they stopped offering new products and rates to their customers, as we're seeing happening today. And ultimately, they transferred tens of thousands of mortgages to other lenders who also didn't offer new products to their customers. And so what you saw happen was the introductory fixed rates on these people's mortgages expired, and they had obviously assumed they'd be able to refinance their mortgage, as lots of mortgage holders do today, but they found they weren't able to because the lender they were with didn't offer new products. The difficulty with these customers in particular is they also couldn't get mortgage products elsewhere because the huge sort of shift in lending rules and attitudinal shifts that took place after the crash meant that they no longer qualified for the very regular high street mortgage products that they previously did.
So those people, as you say, they're sort of mortgage prisoners and now face a sum of money that they might have been able to just afford before a crisis, but now we're all being slapped with this, these extra rates and extra money having to be afforded for other things, that they will simply not be able to afford their mortgage. What should they do?
Well, it's very difficult to advise what people should do because everyone will be in different circumstances. You know, what's affordable for someone won't be for somebody else. But the difficulty, you know, for mortgage prisoners is they have been paying these 5-6% rates for 15 years. And so the increases that we're seeing very adversely affecting new entrants to the market, people looking to refinance. You know, they're seeing increases from maybe 1 or 2% to 5 or 6%. These mortgage prisoners will be seeing, as you said, increases that take their interest repayments into the double digits. So really, people have got to bear in mind that, you know, lenders have got to well, lenders really have got to bear in mind that they've got these obligations, regulatory obligations, to treat their customers fairly. And that requires them to take into the wider context as to what's happening and the individual circumstances of their customers.
So at the moment, I mean, if there is legal action happening with this, presumably those lenders do not appear to be doing that at this stage.
Well, that's absolutely right. So the claims that we're pursuing for mortgage prisoner customers are claims based on the fact that we say lenders have breached these regulatory obligations. We say they've also breached terms of the customer's mortgage contracts, which require them to act in a fair way when setting interest rates.
So in just a few words then, what should you do? Should you, first of all, contact your mortgage company and talk it through with them? Because they always say communication is the best thing at this stage. Tell them your fears. And if not, well, goodness only knows, what do they do next?
Well, absolutely. An open dialogue is hugely important, and that should be the first port of call. But that's why we're really sort of pursuing these claims so urgently now, and they are getting a lot of attention because the constant reminder that needs to be put on lenders is that they have these obligations, and you know, they seem to, for some borrowers, have been forgotten for too long, and that's what we're trying to remedy with these legal claims.
OK. Olivia, good to see you this morning. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much indeed. If you're affected by that, we'd love to hear from you.
Yes, absolutely. How are you going to cope? Time is 6:45. We've got lots more to come, including a look, of course, through the newspapers.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne on your TV, your radio and online. It is 6:47.
Yeah, time to go through the papers now. Joining us this morning is former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall and a late editor of the I newspaper, that is, Benjamin Butterworth. I always hate saying late editor.
I know, it sounds like I'm
You're the
recently
late-
deceased.
But it does, yes. Very weird. There
Still
has to be a
alive.
better description, I think.
Senior
anyway.
reporter, we'll go with that one.
Oh! Have you just promoted yourself or not?
No, I have that title
that's
as
right.
well.
Oh, that's
Do you?
okay.
Yeah.
But it does sound better than the late editor.
It does, yes.
But we'll start with you because you've been looking at this prospect of winter blackouts in the Times.
Yes, so the National Grid, and this is pretty unprecedented, I think, has made a warning that there could be blackouts to electricity of up to 3 hours a day, maybe between 4 and 7 p.m. So we'll still be able to watch you, so that's all good. And that could come later in the year because of a shortage of gas being able to get into the country country from Europe.
But we've got to be careful not to scaremonger, because this is worst of the worst-case scenario.
It is, and Nadeem Zahawi, the Cabinet Minister, said last night that it's not something they're expecting to happen. He described it exactly as you just did. Now, Liz Truss, when she was asked about this while running for Tory leader a short but seemingly long time ago, she said that there will not be any blackouts. However, I think you have to balance that against the fact that the National Grid would not make this suggestion lightly. And one of the problems is that we don't have enough gas shortage in this country. So in 2012, lots of our capacity to store gas was got rid of. So we're reliant for what's coming in on a fairly short-term basis. I think there were reports in the papers yesterday that we were 6 hours from not having enough gas in March of this year. So, you know, it's a very real problem. I think what they're trying to do, one of the suggestions the National Grid has made, is that they would pay people to turn off their appliances during peak times. So if you don't need to be running all the lights and the telly and all the rest of it at those hours, if you know your life is structured in a different way, then they'll give you some money back to turn things off then. And so then everyone else can still have capacity.
But there is a problem with that, in that it's only people with smart meters. And I think we've all seen that they're not the most reliable pieces of kit on the market, and it's only about half the households in the UK have them. So it's not going to be everybody.
Don't you think there's something morally wrong about having to pay people to save energy? We should be doing that anyway, shouldn't we?
I mean, do you know what? It's made me really aware of wasting energy. I've turned into my grandmother at home.
Me too, I've turned into my father. Absolutely, I'm switching lights off as I go out of a room.
Do you know what? I went on a late night walk the other day to stretch my legs through central London, and I noticed just how many shops and cafes and things that have long been closed by 11 p.m. at night, they have all their lights on inside. There was one big coffee chain that had everything lit up, and I just thought, surely things like that have to end at a time like this.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think there's a responsibility
but apparently,
to do that.
telling anyone to do that or reminding anyone to do that is becoming a nanny state. I was saying just about half an hour ago, we should have public information things on the telly, telling everybody, not telling, but just reminding everybody that you can really do a lot by just switching off a light here and an appliance there. But apparently, according to Max and Scott and Ian and Sheila, it's all about being a nanny state.
Well, so Jacob Rees-Mogg had suggested a £15 million campaign public information campaign of how to save electricity, how to, turn the heating off, turn the lights off. But Liz Truss has ruled that out on ideological grounds, is the quote in the paper. I don't really know how you can be sort of ideologically opposed to common sense, but she says that she doesn't want it because she doesn't believe in the concept of public information campaigns. She says, and some people will strongly agree with this, I suspect, you shouldn't be telling people what to do as a government. The problem is that I think it might be in all our interests to encourage, to nudge people towards those behaviours at the moment.
Let us know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Claire, to the Telegraph, 2 million families are losing childcare help.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of off the back of the changes made to child benefit payments that were made back in 2013. So you ended up in a very, very strange situation where a couple who earned £50,000 each would still receive the full child benefit, but one earner earning £60,000 and the other one not, they would lose everything. So it was always a very strange system. But by freezing child benefit payments, the Exchequer saved £2.5 billion, which is a fair chunk of money. But because of the way wages move and it hasn't been looked at since 2013, more and more people are falling into this section of society who are losing out, which comes sort of at great odds with what Liz Truss wants to do with childcare in the coming months. She wants to make childcare more for everybody, make it more available. But if you're taking away sort of with one hand and trying to make people use childcare and get people back into work, you can't square that off. I think that somebody needs to sit down really and look at this. I mean, this is 26% of families will have lost most or all of their child benefit for what was once a universal payment for families. It used to be the family allowance many years ago.
Well, it was really invented for mums, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
In recognition of the fact that it was a very old-fashioned thing, but it was a benefit, recognising the fact that mum didn't always get enough money from dad to look after the kids.
That's right.
It was literally structured in that way, but I mean, it's had to obviously change because we view family life differently nowadays.
It was, and it was the allowance given to the woman in order to buy things for the children, to provide, and to have almost like pocket money. So it was a very outdated model. However, most people who received it put it straight into childcare. I mean, when you look at childcare costs are pretty much on average £11,000 a year just for one child. Gosh. It's a lot of money. And the child benefit itself, you know, you're looking at £21.80 per week for one.
Should we be funding that, though? In the sense that people didn't have childcare like that when I was growing up in the 70s. It just didn't exist. Well, certainly not where I came from. It was a different
model. I don't know how did it work? How did it change so fundamentally? I mean, the model wasn't it, that Dad went out to work and probably spent a lot of his wages in the pub in the evening. Mum was looking after the kids and doing all the cooking, and that's why child benefit was invented, so that she would at least have enough money to squirrel away that was paid to her, so that she could feed the kids.
Exactly, and I think that a lot of it is that it's based on a system of one parent going out to work and one parent looking after the child. And when that child went to school at the age of 5, the mother normally would be at home after school. They would maybe work part-time. But, you know, life has changed and we can't survive.
Why has it changed so fundamentally? Why can't we live like that anymore?
I mean, I would say that given that Liz Truss's central ambition as Prime Minister is growth, I think the extortionate cost of childcare is something that holds back growth a lot. You know, we are something like 3 times more expensive for childcare than it is in Germany. We're way more than most European countries for the amount that average families spend on childcare. And if you think about all the families where mum or dad doesn't go out to work or doesn't go out to work as many hours because the cost of that doesn't make up for the cost of having someone look after the kids. I think that's a central problem for trying to have growth in the economy.
Is it also an acceptance?
I just thought it seems very... It's criticised, isn't it, when people stay at home to look after children.
But that's what I'm saying. Is it no longer feasible then? Is it the only way you can now live in a house with a family is to have 2 incomes?
I think it is, in all fairness, and I know I spent pretty much 80% of my salary on rent when I was a single parent, and the rest of it went on childcare. And I was in that situation that I needed to keep a roof over my head, so I needed to work, and in order to work, I needed to access childcare. So you're stuck in that, and if I didn't go out to work, then I would have been accused of just sitting around, not doing anything, and claiming benefits. So it's a really, really tricky one.
Yeah. Can't win either way on that one, can you? Look, we're out of time, I'm afraid. Claire, Benjamin, thank you both. We'll catch up with you a little bit later on. We've got more to come in just a little moment, including more legal trouble for the Daily Mail.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Spell of heavy rain moving south through the day today. Either side of that, there'll be some sunny spells, but there'll be some gusty winds too. That spell of rain, courtesy of this weather front slowly sinking its way south. It's making for a pretty wet start out there this morning. Parts of southern Scotland and Northern Ireland, and fairly smartly spreading now into parts of northern England too. It's a fairly lively weather front, so some quite heavy bursts of rain, and it'll push into parts of North Wales, northwest England by the end of the morning. Behind that, brighter skies for eastern Scotland, plenty of showers for western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Further south, 1 or 2 showers, but much of East Anglia and the southeast will be dry for most of the day. Another pretty mild day here as well, despite the breeze 18 or 19. But this narrow band of rain pushes across the Midlands, southwest England later on. Not lasting too long, but it could be pretty intense, and it will be around across East Anglia and the southeast for this evening's rush hour. So just bear that in mind if you're heading away this Friday evening. It does clear through, and then many places having clear spells tonight. There'll be some showers keeping going in western Scotland and some coming in from the Irish Sea into northwest England. But the winds ease off overnight as well. That will allow it to turn quite chilly, actually, a colder night than the one just gone. We're down into single figures for most to start the weekend. So a fresh start on Saturday, but by and large a sunny start. There will be through the day a few showers coming into western Scotland, maybe the odd one for Northern Ireland, northwest England too, but actually for most places looking like a decent day tomorrow with sunny spells for the majority, and temperatures after a chilly start getting up to about average come the afternoon, generally into the teens. So the weekend mostly starting dry and fine, and certainly for most of England and Wales it will stay that way into Sunday as well. But we are looking at a change with outbreaks of rain coming into parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Liz Truss rules out energy-saving campaigns amid power blackout warnings.
Good morning. It's 7 o'clock on Friday, the 7th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
We're live across the whole of the UK on your TV, your radio and online, so wherever you are, you can take us with you. These are your top stories.
Well, the Prime Minister has ruled out launching an energy-saving campaign amidst warnings that planned blackouts could hit the UK if power plants can't get enough gas to keep running.
Prince Harry, Elton John, David Furnish, Liz Hurley and others are suing the Daily Mail for breaches of privacy. 7 claims have been issued at the High Court and sent to Mail headquarters in London. Private investigators allege landlines were tapped, cars broken into and homes were bugged.
And the big fight between Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr. on Saturday has been called off due to a failed drugs test. An adverse analytical finding for trace amounts of a fertility drug was found in one of Benn's recent tests by the Voluntary Anti-Doping Association.
We would love to hear from you this morning. Loads of you getting in touch. We'll run through those a little bit later on. If you want to join in, please do. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Now, the Prime Minister has ruled against launching an energy-saving public information campaign amid warnings that a planned 3-hour blackout could be imposed in some areas across the UK during winter.
The National Grid says consumers could face the power outage to ensure that the grid doesn't collapse in the unlikely event that gas supplies fall short of demand. Now, earlier on, we spoke to Malcolm Grinston, who is the Senior Research Fellow at the Centre for Energy Policy and Technology at Imperial College.
Every year, the National Grid, usually to not much fanfare, does this sort of planning. It looks at a number of possibilities depending on how cold the winter is, whether you might get interruptions, say, to gas supply, whether there might be very low wind speeds, so we didn't have terribly much wind power available, and come up with likelihoods of or a variety of possibilities and how they would respond to them. It is true that it's tighter this year than it's been probably for decades, particularly because of the crisis in Ukraine and the response of OPEC by cutting back on oil production, which will have some knock-on effect with gas. It is more likely this coming year than it has been for a long time but it is still not the most likely scenario. But power cuts are so damaging. You have to reboot your whole house these days if you get a fairly short power cut. If they're prolonged, then you can lose transportation. Heaven forbid, you can lose power to hospitals and so on. So you do need to make this sort of planning, even if it turns out that the worst case scenario didn't occur. And so, yeah, unlikely, but possible.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we all sort of reflect back to the 70s and what happened then and how we got through it. But, of course, it's a different world now. So much of our industry, so much of our economy is based on the internet. And if all that goes down with a power cut, it's a whole different ballgame.
That's completely right. And it's further than that. To get the petrol out of the pumps now, a petrol pump is an electronic machine that requires electricity in a way that in the past, around the 70s, the last big crisis, you could get at fuel much more easily because electricity wasn't as all-pervading as it is. And so it's both the fact that it's much more damaging if you get the interruption in real time, but also it takes a long time to recover. I remember when there was power cuts to the tube in London, not so a little while ago now. The actual power cut itself was 3/4 of an hour, but it took over 2 hours to reboot all of the computers and get the tube trains running again at a time when people were stuck underground in many cases. So electricity cuts have always been serious, but that's become more and more so as our whole economy has changed and electricity has become so much more central. I think we do need to have some public advice and public discussion saying, not to frighten people, but just to say, if you are told, and the plan is you'll be told the day before that there's a power cut of up to 3 hours, it's worth pointing out now your fridge and your freezer aren't going to be affected by that. They're perfectly capable of keeping food cool for 3 hours, so you don't need to worry about that. But you might want to think about what power are you using, likely to be using at that time. Can you get ready for it? So, for example, you're not in the middle of doing some work on a computer and you suddenly lose it all because the power goes out. So just some basic advice around that sort of thing. Pretty much every country in the world, apart from the UK, is giving that sort of advice now. And it does work. In Japan, after the great earthquake in 2011, when they had real power difficulties for a while, they did have a big campaign which led to a 15% reduction in electricity, which meant they had no enforced power cuts apart from in the immediate area of the earthquake at a very, very stressful time. These campaigns do work, and I, for the life of me, can't work out why the government isn't prepared to invest and put the resources into one.
Well, what do you think? Tony in Bury St Edmunds has been in touch. Morning, Tony. He says, it's been said power cuts are unlikely, so why mention it? Is it really necessary to scare people? I think it's a case of if we know that it's a possibility and we can all reduce our consumption, it eases the pressure, so it makes it less likely. Yeah. But I mean,
but that's why a lot of people are calling for some sort of public information campaign. Bernard said it's scaremongering. We lived through the 70s, bring it on. Different days, though, nowadays, aren't they?
Do you know what it is? It's the internet more than anything else, I think, because we lose all that ability to work. It would really damage the economy in a way that it did in the 70s.
If you knew that you were going to be out for the next 3 hours or something, if you'd had warning, you could do your work in a different way, couldn't you, for the next 3 hours? Yeah. Shouldn't we all be able to get through it? Chris says it's the switching on and off of the lights that takes the electricity. Now, I'm not sure that's true, because we've always been told switch on a light when you go into a room, but switch it off when you exit the room. Is there an argument that actually all the switching on and off takes more energy than leaving it on in the first place? If you're an electrician, let us know.
Yeah, I can't see how that would be the case. But I'm not an expert.
But certainly leaving them on all night, as many buildings do,
is
surely the bad thing at the moment.
Paul's a forward planner. Paul says, I bought a box of candles online on Wednesday, £19 for 45. I suggest buy them now before the price triples.
Yeah.
Because they will go up.
And then, of course, you will get the nanny state type warnings from the fire service, who will say candles can be very dangerous.
Yeah.
So I sort of get the nanny state argument there, because we know they are, but if that's all you've got at the time, surely we've got to responsibly be able to use candles.
Talking of being responsible, Colin in Gillingham says, went to the local pharmacy and noticed half the ceiling lights were turned off. A great initiative as long as safety and security are not compromised. I think that's what we need to do.
Yes, I mean, a lot of businesses argue that it's about security, is leaving the lights on all night in office buildings and everything. But halving them, switching off half of them, surely that's possible. Still have a certain amount of security, wouldn't you? And surely that would all add up, wouldn't it? And be a huge saving.
It would. I think we need to look at all of these things, don't we? Just so we don't end up in a very bad place.
Now, on to another big story, but presumably involving those who can probably afford their electricity bills. Prince Harry, Sir Elton John and lots of other celebrities are suing the publisher of the Daily Mail, the Mail on Sunday and the Mail Online.
Now, the legal action claims to have compelling evidence of gross breaches of privacy by associated newspapers.
And that publisher has responded to the allegations, describing them as preposterous smears.
Let's talk to Nicholas Owen, former Royal correspondent, who joins us now. Morning to you, Nicholas. I mean, obviously there's a lot of focus on the celebrities, but particularly Prince Harry in all of this. He has become a little bit litigious, I guess. I mean, do we know what they're saying about this, the Sussexes?
Well, we know what collectively these people are saying, and I must say it's an extraordinary coalition to me of people, if I can use that rather posh word about this. Prince Harry is bound to be seen as the sort of leading figure in this, but Elton John as well, his partner, his husband David Furnish, we've got Sadie Frost, the actress, Elizabeth Hurley, we've got Baroness Lawrence. I have to say with Baroness Lawrence, she's the mother of Stephen Lawrence, the young black man who was murdered, you remember? That's a rather curious business, because these actions, these libel actions, this huge libel action is being taken against associated newspapers, publishers of the Daily Mail, the Mail on Sunday and Mail Online. And of course, that group campaigned very vigorously to get the killers of Stephen Lawrence put behind bars. So that's a rather curious sort of thing about all this. But people will be focusing, as you say, on Prince Harry and, by extension, his wife Meghan Markle, who have got a lot of background in suing particularly associated newspapers, mostly successfully, it has to be said. But so many fascinating things about this. And of course, as we all know, in the journalistic trade, you've got to tread a bit carefully here too. You can't start agreeing or disagreeing. We just don't know what a lot of these allegations are really all about. They do seem to go back a very long way. There's talk that it's an echo of the phone tapping arguments that led to the closure of the News of the World. That this is an extraordinary legal turn of events. And I tell you one thing, from the point of view of a former royal correspondent like myself, turns the spotlight straight back from all the funeral of Queen Elizabeth, the accession of King Charles III. Here we are back to Prince Harry and inevitably Meghan.
It's got to be said, associated newspapers are vigorously denying this.
They are. They call it preposterous. I mean, there's a whole long list of allegations being made here. They range from things that you might expect to things that you don't expect. They say accuse journalists of, presumably journalists, writers, or somebody or other, perhaps private investigations, of impersonating people, of bugging homes, of bugging cars. This seems to the outsider, somebody who, most of us not really familiar with the way some of these practices go on or used to go on, does sound like an extraordinary shopping list of things. If there's any grounds at all in them, this is going to open up the most enormous row. And one of the little things that I noticed here, great long list of arguments, long list of people suing, all getting together, powerful figures, people, as you said, with plenty of money. They can pursue this as much as they like. Associated Newspapers also has an awful lot of money. But it really does echo what was happening to the News of the World, a real attack an attack. Now, from the point of view of the people suing for libel, they're going to say this is exactly what we need to do. Our lives have been turned upside down and made miserable by this. On the other hand, the Associated newspapers are going to call this a huge attack on the freedom of the press. It's extremely difficult at the moment to know where this is heading. But as I say, puts the spotlight straight back on a side and a part of the royal family, and arguments going back over previous legal cases, of which there have been many. Yes, Harry himself, nice picture you've got of him there, being very cheerful. Not cheerful, really, when it comes to the media. And why? Because we go back to the days of his mother, Princess Diana, 25 years ago. And there's another major connection, two major connections there. First of all, she suffered, obviously, and everybody knows, at the hands of the media, the paparazzi, who possibly chased her to a terribly untimely death. But also, Elton John, the other figure, the major figure in this latest action, very, very close to Princess Diana, performed at her wedding and was extremely friendly with her, and then later years became extremely friendly with her sons, both Harry and William, of course. William not mentioned in this at all, one should be clear, and then became extremely friendly with Meghan. So I think you ran some pictures a little earlier on, very interesting pictures of Elton John and David Furnish, who we see in the centre there in the picture, with Harry and Meghan, and Elton John putting his arms around Meghan. Lovely, a lovely hugging gesture. Great friends together, whispering in her ear something nice. But it does emphasise this is a really big deal. And I have to say, in all my years in this trade, and there've been a few, I don't recall anything remotely like it.
Okay, Nicholas, for now, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it takes tremendous courage to sue a newspaper and a lot of money. So you could argue that they've got together, but it does show a certain amount of courage and maybe confidence, self-confidence in their case. However, as we've said many times, the Mail titles absolutely refute it and say it's preposterous nonsense. And they actually say it's nothing more than a pre-planned and orchestrated attempt to drag the Mail titles into the phone hacking scandal concerning articles up to 30 years old. Doesn't matter how old, though, does it?
No. Well, that'll go to court and we shall see how it unfolds. It is 7:15. Let's bring you up to date with some of the other headlines. And the government's opened a new licensing round for oil and gas exploration in the North Sea. It's the first for 3 years. As many as 100 licences could be granted. The Business Secretary says it will boost the economy, energy security and support skilled jobs.
Retailers have seen their slowest sales growth since shops reopened after the COVID pandemic. A survey from the advisory firm BDO says it's due to the worsening cost of living crunch. It said total like-for-like sales in September increased by 2.8% year on year.
The UK and Ireland have said they'll work to try to resolve the stalemate over the Northern Ireland Protocol. The Foreign Secretary met his Irish counterpart last night, discussing their mutual desire for action. First bilateral meeting between the UK and Ireland since Liz Truss became Prime Minister will be followed by the British-Irish Intergovernmental Conference later on. $7:17. The Prime Minister has called on European leaders to unite on energy and economy amidst an escalating Russian aggression. Well, Liz Truss also urged the group to address the fundamental causes of energy and migration challenges and strengthened relations with French President Emmanuel Macron, who she called a friend, as they announced plans to work together to tackle migration.
Well, let's go to GB News political editor now, Darren McCaffrey, who can tell us more. And you're in Prague at the moment, I think, Darren, still?
Yeah, I am indeed. Good morning, Anne and Stephen. The Prime Minister may well have left. EU leaders, though, are remaining today for a second day of a summit. But it was a really fascinating political day. This was the European political community, many viewing it as an attempt maybe at EU 2.0, the brainchild of Emmanuel Macron. Though for Liz Truss, the Prime Minister, that's not how she viewed it. She viewed it as a chance to talk about some of the big global issues facing the UK. Ukraine, unsurprisingly, was a big issue here. here. We've heard from President Biden, haven't we, overnight, suggesting that we're at the closest to nuclear Armageddon than we've been since the 1960s, which is not entirely reassuring. But what we did see, at least from European leaders yesterday, was continued solidarity with President Zelensky in that war in Ukraine. But it was on France, I think, where the most political progress seemed to be made. As you say, during the summer there were questions when Liz Truss left it out in the open about whether Emmanuel Macron was a friend or a foe. Well, yesterday she very clearly defined him as a friend, suggesting that the Entente Cordiale is back. Why do I say that? Is because we're going to see an UK-France summit next summer. Interior ministers, so the Home Secretary and a counterpart in France, are working together. What we're told is an ambitious package to try and deal with the migration crisis, the illegal boat crisis in the English Channel. There's clearly been a change of tone, I think, in direction from the government, recognising that France really do have to be part of the solution on all of that. We know deals have been done in the past. We know they've been frustrating, but this is an attempt at renewing that agreement to try and deal with that crisis. And then also France's participation in nuclear energy. And you guys were talking earlier on, weren't you, about potential blackouts this winter. Now, clearly, Sizewell C and more nuclear plants in the UK is not going to help in the immediate term, but Liz Truss has been talking over the last couple of days, but been trying to ensure that what is potentially going to happen this winter cannot happen in the future by signing those long-term energy deals and by trying to get nuclear energy back on line in the UK in the sense of building more stations. And France is a big part of that because it is a bit of a nuclear powerhouse in Europe. And also, interestingly, there was a deal signed for the UK, having been turfed out because of Brexit, to rejoin the North Sea Energy Cooperation Group, which essentially gives you more access to wind farms and energy generation in northwest Europe, which could be very helpful for the UK in the months and years ahead. So I think Liz Truss views this as a pretty successful summit. I think on the whole it actually has been one in terms of greater cooperation with our European allies. It's strange that she's almost had an easier, more welcoming time here on the continent. I'm sure she's not looking forward to necessarily going back to all the wrangling at home. Politics somewhat turned upside down, I might suggest.
Maybe just a little. Darren, thank you. Let's talk to columnist at the New European, Paul Connew, who's here in the studio. Good to see you this morning, Paul. As we mentioned, this sort of closer relationship with Emmanuel Macron, you let out a little snigger.
He's gone from a foe to friend, in fact.
Well, that's a good thing, isn't it?
A very good thing. I mean, I'm a Remainer anyway, so I think that the better the bridges we build back to Europe, is good for us. And I'm sure Liz Truss is absolutely happy to be in Prague rather than in Westminster at the moment. She's certainly got a better reception there than she's getting from some of her own cabinet ministers, let alone backbenchers.
Should we be surprised, though? Because it was all Brexit, the goal of Brexit, or well, not the goal, but part of the sort of standing for Brexit was not that we were going to end up hating our European colleagues, but that we would work with them in a different way.
Some of the tone of it was, though. I was in a strange position because I was a staunch Remainer. I was a rare pundit who predicted Leave would win the referendum, but I also predicted that public opinion would turn against Brexit. And now that reality is setting in, if you look at the last 12 opinion polls, they show that the public are now sceptical about Brexit. It's not working for them in the way they thought, and that applies to both Remainers and Leavers.
Well, maybe it hasn't been given enough time to work as well, because we've been through other crises, haven't we?
Yes, but it's very easy to actually blame COVID and the Ukraine war for issues which do relate to our position on Brexit. Most economists will argue that Brexit is damaging the UK's economy. And
yes, but we're there now.
It's interesting to see Steve Baker, one of the leading MPs who actually largely played a part in ousting Theresa May, now a junior minister in the Northern Ireland office, actually apologising for the tone of some of his words during the Brexit campaign. So it's interesting, without doubt. Liz Truss, interesting with her changes of mind and mood. There she was, once a staunch Remainer, then a zealous Brexit convert, but who now looks like she's keen to build bridges to Europe far more so than Boris Johnson was.
Yes, but bridges are a good thing. We're not going to go back into the EU.
They're a very good thing.
We're not going to go back into the EU. I mean, that's clear. Even Keir Starmer...
I'm not arguing for
went
that. But there are Tory MPs, including people like Daniel Hannan, now Lord Hannan, who was one of the leading Brexit campaigners, who's now advocating that perhaps we should consider rejoining the single market and the customs union without fully rejoining the EU. Whether the EU would buy that, I don't know.
No, because tinkering, isn't it?
That's tinkering.
It's more than tinkering.
And that
economists would say that would be a massive boost to the UK's economy.
But it would also mean free movement of people, and migration is one of the biggest issues.
Well, the argument is that the EU would want us back in, ideally, and there might be a lot more flexibility on freedom of movement. I think the freedom of movement issue was overplayed. There are ways of controlling immigration without actually...
Yeah, but we can't have this argument all over again. We've done Brexit, haven't we now?
No, I was once an advocate of a second referendum. I'm not arguing for that now, not in the near future anyway, but rebuilding bridges to the extent of rejoining the single market or the customs union, if that deal could be arranged, would certainly make sense. Especially in these economic times.
Go down like a lead balloon with a lot of people, though.
Well, not according to the polls. If you look at the anti-Brexit feeling now on about, say, the last 10 or 11 opinion polls, it's a steady trend. The public may be ahead of the politicians on this.
Oh, well, we shall see. Paul, thank you very much indeed. Your thoughts, please.
Oh, my goodness, your thoughts, please. I'll bet you've got thoughts on that one. Do get in touch, UK. GBNews at gbnews.uk. Thank you very much. Still can't get it right. I've been here months now.
We'll get there eventually. Now, today we'll be finding out what the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, thinks about the cost of living crisis as they deliver their economic forecast to Kwasi Kwarteng,
Yeah,
the
interesting.
Chancellor.
Changes to our living habits are being recommended to us on what seems like a daily basis, and now households are being encouraged to use appliances during off-peak hours to help avoid those blackouts this winter.
Well, our national reporter, Theo Chikomba, has been speaking to some of those who've already made changes to their lives because of the cost of living crisis.
Across the country, you're seeing more people come through, now more than ever, as energy and fuel costs rise. Here in Milton Keynes, they are seeing families from all financial backgrounds come for emergency food parcels.
We always have very high demand in January because it's cold, and food bank use often goes hand in hand with cold weather and heating bills. But this year, we've not seen the drop that we would normally expect once the warmer weather came in. So throughout spring and summer this year, our demand stayed high and then began to increase again as the cost of living rose. What this meant was that in August, we actually gave out more food parcels than we did in January, which is virtually unheard of, and also means that we're braced for a really tough winter.
And following the Chancellor's budget, many industry experts were saying this was a missed opportunity. But will this forecast provide any further clarity of the economic situation in the country in the short term and the long term?
Independent musicians like SJ and her band count on live performances to bring money in, but the cost of touring, especially abroad, has almost doubled.
Quite hard for like emerging acts like us to go over to Europe, for instance, because there's so many extra costs involved in that now than there wasn't before, and you know the rise in petrol, for instance, it just makes it really hard for us to get a profit on tour.
The cost of living has gone up. People's pockets are being squeezed now. Has that had an impact on people coming to your gigs at all?
It's hard to like bring people along to your tours because a lot of people just don't really want to go out anymore, and you know people are tighter on money, so it is harder to get your audiences out there. But ones that are willing, it's always great still.
Meanwhile, back at the food bank, their work is cut out this winter as demand is going up, even though donations are going down.
We're seeing about 550 people every week at the moment, and that is increasing steadily. It's about a third more than this time last year. And we think that the way things are going with high energy costs and food prices, that this winter could increase to even higher demand than ever before.
For now, volunteers and staff here are on the front line, ready to help those in need, with the hope the country's economic outlook improves so the food bank's demand reduces in the near future. Theo Chikomba, GB News.
Well, there's all sorts of issues, of course, and one of them is the state of the housing market. The Halifax House Price Index for September showed that valuations had fallen by 0.1%.
Now, what does that really mean? Property author and director at real estate platform IMMO, or is it IMO?
IMO.
Anna Claire Harper joins us now. Yeah, what does that really mean? 0.1%. What does that mean to us?
I mean, it's not a huge difference. From month to month, there are fluctuations in the market because people want to buy and sell at different times. For example, summer is typically quieter than autumn. And the overall trend has been upward. There's a lot of media sensation around.
I mean, it's been about 10% year on year, hasn't it?
Exactly. We've had substantial growth over the last couple of years, and a slight slowdown in that pace of growth is expected, but it's not all doom and gloom.
Well, I mean, what impact has the mini budget had on the housing market?
Yeah, good question. The problem in the housing market is one of supply. We don't have enough housing, in particular enough quality, energy efficient, affordable housing, and the budget doesn't really help that. The biggest policy that's been reported on is the effective reduction in stamp duty land tax, which is designed to help, in particular, first-time buyers. The trouble is that that is outweighed by the additional cost of mortgages as interest rates have risen, and also the additional cost of living. So it's not necessarily a net gain for a potential first-time buyer.
I think there are a lot of people who are scared out there that their mortgage is going to change and they're suddenly going to be faced with a monthly sum that they just cannot cope with. And also, I mean, first time, my son was just about to buy a house and has now happily sort of held back because he was scared. And I think a lot of first-time buyers must be facing this, scared that he was going to land himself in a mire that maybe would get worse and worse.
Well, you're quite right. And that is the general reaction in the market. When things like this happen, things slow down. It doesn't mean they stop, but they do slow down, and people put off decisions that they might make. And that's not a bad or a good thing. I think to the point about your son, that is the best advice that can be given, is that for any big transaction decisions, give yourself a cushion. And if you don't have a cushion, maybe don't make that decision just yet. A time cushion, flexibility. If you do know you need to sell in the next 12 months, give yourself a head start. And a financial cushion. And if you're about to make a buying decision, make sure there is that cushion before you make the decision.
Do we need to readjust slightly? Mike in Midhurst has been in touch. Morning, Mike. Makes a really good point, actually. He says, I'm afraid we have a generation who are used to very cheap money. There's been no planning for the inevitable return to what are normal interest rates.
I mean, that is true. We are used to lower interest rates. And the reality is we all have a relatively short-term memory. We forget things very quickly. It's only a few years ago that, the whole housing market really ground to a halt during COVID. We can have a bit of a short memory. And actually, sometimes we can look at short-term trends. For example, the 9.9% annual growth in the year to this month from the Halifax index. We can look at that as though that's the truth forever, but actually the long-term story is more important for the residential market because it is a long-term investment or purchase decision.
Is there something the government could do that would ease things up a bit?
It's all around supply. The problem is supply. So it's about new supply and it's about helping to improve existing supply.
Isn't it about realistic supply as well? I mean, I go on my journey home, I see houses for sale all the way home. So there's a lot of houses for sale, but they're probably not at the right price.
Well, it's all about the pricing. And the same with any buying and selling decisions. It's always a good time to buy or sell at the right price. But that depends on local demand. It depends on the property type. And it also depends on the quality. And one of the biggest problems that the housing market is facing now is the retrofitting challenge. We need to upgrade the energy performance of housing, and for very obvious reasons right now. But that's really difficult without proper guidance and public sector support, so government support. That's the biggest challenge that we're facing, and perhaps a reason why people are putting off buying some of the lower quality, less energy efficient properties.
Well, it's difficult to get a mortgage on something with a low quality emission.
Oh, dear. Anna Claire Harper, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Sue says mortgage rates should be lower for first-time buyers to get on the property ladder. It sounds like a good idea.
But for how long do you keep them low?
I don't know. But I like the idea.
Yes, I do
Anyway,
too.
keep your thoughts coming through gbviews at gbnews.uk.
And there's lots more to come, including all the sports news, so do stay with us.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Spell of heavy rain moving south through the day today. Either side of that, there'll be some sunny spells, but there'll be some gusty winds too. That spell of rain, courtesy of this weather front slowly sinking its way south. It's making for a pretty wet start out there this morning. Parts of southern Scotland and Northern Ireland, and fairly smartly spreading now into parts of northern England too. It's a fairly lively weather front, so some quite heavy bursts of rain, and it'll push into parts of North Wales, northwest England by the end of the morning. Behind that, brighter skies for eastern Scotland, plenty of showers for western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Further south, 1 or 2 showers, but much of East Anglia and the southeast will be dry for most of the day. Another pretty mild day here as well, despite the breeze 18 or 19. But this narrow band of rain pushes across the Midlands, southwest England later on. Not lasting too long, but it could be pretty intense, and it will be around across East Anglia and the southeast for this evening's rush hour. So just bear that in mind if you're heading away this Friday evening. It does clear through, and then many places having clear spells tonight. So there'll be some showers keeping going in western Scotland, and some coming in from the Irish Sea into northwest England. But the winds ease off overnight as well. That will allow it to turn quite chilly, actually, a colder night than the one just gone. We're down into single figures for most to start the weekend. So a fresh start on Saturday, but by and large, a sunny start. There will be through the day a few showers coming into western Scotland, maybe the odd one for Northern Ireland, northwest England too. But actually for most places, looking like a decent day tomorrow with sunny spells for the majority, and temperatures after a chilly start getting up to about average come the afternoon, generally into the teens. So the weekend mostly starting dry and fine, and certainly for most of England and Wales it will stay that way into Sunday as well. But we are looking at a change with outbreaks of rain coming into parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
"7:37. Good morning to you. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Ooh,
go on.
Got some really good views coming in. Thank you very much for them. Eddie in Worthing says, I come from an energy background, and I can tell you we have as much chance of energy blackouts as we have of stopping illegal channel crossings. In other words, nothing's going to happen.
Ooh, harsh. And we're talking about love as well, and how to keep your relationship alive, because an expert's come out with some bits and bobs we're going to run through a bit later on. Fergus says, an unexpected, thoughtful gift helps, as it shows you were thinking about your beloved, even when they're not around.
That's right.
My father got an iron for my mother for Christmas. They ended up getting divorced.
Oh, an iron? Yeah, that's not a good present for anyone.
No.
You know, either way.
Thought you'd enjoy this. Yeah. Yeah.
No.
You know, we need helpful tips. How to keep
you know
the
your
spark
relationship's
going.
over when he buys you an iron for Christmas.
Yeah.
It's just not on, is it?
It's not on.
Be a bit more thoughtful than that.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll take you through those tips on how to keep the spark in your relationship going a bit later on.
Yeah. In the meantime, Paul Coit will take us through the big sparks in the sports stories. Good
What about if it's one of those steam irons, though? Your really deluxe, nice iron.
The
Not
only-
any iron whatsoever.
The only sort
any
of
old
iron that would impress me is somebody else to do it.
Right, fine. OK.
That's
where
a
they
little
went
bit
wrong.
better than, but not an iron.
That's where they went wrong.
Yeah.
So you want to talk about the sport?
Yeah. Should we talk about what's not happening in the sport?
Right, OK, I went through the whole thing yesterday and it was very long and convoluted, but we'll try and cut it down as much as possible. Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr., who's supposed to be fighting at the O2 tomorrow. So we spoke about this earlier on in the week about the weight differences, because
and Chris Eubank not happy.
Exactly, because the 3 weight differences between the 2 fighters. So Chris Eubank, of course, the father, obviously, of Chris Eubank Jr., he was very upset and very worried for his son, because the thing is he would have to lose a lot of weight to then fight Conor Benn, who is also moving up a weight. So the more weight you lose, the more strength you lose, and it also affects your ability to take a punch. So it's not a good idea if you're a boxer and you have to lose a lot of weight to fight. So anyway, this is where we were. And even then there was some controversy around it. And then the story breaks a couple of days ago that Conor Benn had tested positive for a banned substance. Now, we've often seen this in sport where a banned substance, it could have been a supplement, or we've seen it so many times in different sports. It's like, well, I had no idea that it had that supplement in. But this is something called clomiphene, and clomiphene is a female fertility drug.
A female fertility?
In other words, it's not the sort of thing that you would imagine a boxer or a man would actually need to take.
No.
Because
wouldn't have thought
although the other way round, unless, I don't know what the excuse is for this one, but if you're a male and you take it, then it increases testosterone, which then increases strength, etc., etc. So you can understand why someone would want to take it, should they want to make themselves strong.
But, I mean, the fact is it shouldn't be in his system, and they're professional sports people, and they should know that.
Correct. End of story.
I mean, that is basically the end. They know that there are random drug tests, and they know that they've got to watch absolutely everything they take, from a vitamin pill through to any sort of...
And this is what they say about all sport. There's no excuse. There's no excuse. But when it's something like that, it's not like, well, did you take it by mistake?
Is he disputing it?
Well, at the moment, he is denying it. But there are 2 tests. So they have to provide samples. Now, this is for VADA, which is a voluntary anti-drugs association. So they came to him and said, right, we need the sample. There's an A and there's a B sample. So the A sample had been tested and that is proved positive. Now, the B sample, which actually comes basically from the same sample, it's just in a different bottle, has to be tested also because...
By a different lab or the same one?
Well, probably the same lab, but the reason they do that is because they say, well, if that was tampered with somehow, then there's another one. But it's it's probably 99% certain that that's going to have the same result as the other one. But we haven't had the result from that. So it goes on. The British Boxing Board of Control said that this fight shouldn't go ahead.
And it's meant to be tomorrow?
It was supposed to be tomorrow night. This has all happened within the last couple of days. So it was announced yesterday that it wasn't going to go ahead, but there's an undercard as well, so there's lots of other fights that are involved. Thousands of people were going to go and see the fight. So where we're left at the moment is you've got Conor Benn is not officially banned, but they've pulled the fight because it would also bring the whole sport of boxing. It would just be a farce. If someone had failed a drugs test and then the whole thing went ahead. So it really is, there's so many different...
Why does it take so long for the second test to be tested?
Well, That's the big question a lot of people are asking. Surely, and it's like, well, it has to go away for a week, does it? Is it not a litmus test or something?
Yeah.
Surely there's a way to test it and then we can know what's going on from there. But there's a lot of money involved. There's a lot more involved than just taking a test in your band. There's a lot more involved in this. It gets very deep, but we'll speak to ex-boxer Spencer Oliver and he'll hopefully make more sense of it than I can.
Hopefully. Let's have a quick run through the football.
What do you say? Hopefully.
Yeah.
It does get very deep. Last night we had Europa League now. Ammonia Nicosia managed to go 1-0 up against Manchester United last night. Now, this is in Nicosia. This is the 4th best side in Cyprus. And really, to be honest with you, it means that Manchester United should be able to wipe the floor with them. They won 3-2. Man United won in the end. But, you know, for me, whereas...
3-2, so it was a fight.
It should have been a lot easier. You know, speaking of Manchester United fans that are saying, oh, yeah, well, you know, it was kind of tricky. And it's like, well, it shouldn't be tricky. It's a game they should win. So they did win, but it should have been easier.
Is their name Ammonia Nicosia?
Yeah, I mean, they weren't the only person stinking the stadium out as well, by the way. Was it? Thank you. Thank you very much. It's Omonia.
It's Omonia.
It's Omonia.
Yeah.
Arsenal beat Bodo Glimt from Norway. They beat them 3-0, so no problem there. Arsenal looking very good. West Ham beat Anderlecht, so that was in the Conference League last night too. So they're all positive results, really. Yeah. A bit like Conor Ben.
Yes, yeah.
There we are. We can tie that up nicely.
Nicely done. Paul Coit, thank you. We'll catch up with you at 9:30.
Good stuff. Thank you.
Right now, though, it's 7:44. Lots more to come, including, of course, the newspapers.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
It is 7:46. Good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne on your TV, on your radio, online as well.
Shall we take a look at today's front pages? The Times leads on the National Grid's warning, saying the UK could face rolling winter blackouts if it doesn't import enough energy from Europe.
The Guardian also leads on power cuts, but highlights how the lives of those who use life-saving machines could be put at risk. I mean, that's the issue. If you've got one of those medical machines at home, what do you do?
The Daily Mail also goes with winter blackouts, saying families are being offered £10 a day to cut electricity at peak times.
And the Eye gives an overview of what winter blackouts could mean for the UK.
Daily Express front page says homes face 3-hour winter power cuts. But it is worth saying here that even though the newspapers are saying that blandly in those huge headlines. It's only the worst-case scenario of a worst-case scenario. If you read the smaller print.
Yeah. Paul says, having planned blackouts will only serve the criminal element. Alarms and CCTV will all fail, thus leaving it wide open for thieves and looters. CCTV would, alarms wouldn't. They've got battery backups.
Yes.
So the alarms would be all right, but I get your point.
And we were asking about whether it costs more, because somebody earlier was saying it costs more, actually, if you're turning on and off the lights. Henrik says, I am an electrician. It costs 0 more at the switching stage, so no more, except in lamps which are designed to emit heat. Central heating is different because it obviously costs more from stone cold rising to hot, whereas leaving it on consistently with the room stat on a very low temperature is cheaper. So turning your lights on and off, according to Henrik, no, that doesn't take any more energy.
Excellent. Well, that's good to know. Let's go through the papers in a bit more detail with former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall and senior reporter for the I newspaper, Benjamin Butterworth. Claire, let's start with the Daily Mirror. Should we be looking at mortgages?
Yes, I mean, this is the sort of ongoing saga of mortgages and the rates that they're going to go up. And I thought it was quite interesting that the guest you just had on was sort of saying, let's all not panic so much. And, of course, in the Mirror, we have panic. House prices to slump by 8%, mortgages set to a 20-year high. I mean, I think that we do need to perhaps have a little bit of perspective.
There's always people moan when the house prices keep going up.
Yeah.
So an 8% slump would be good for first-time buyers.
How much of all of this is the media's fault, is actually overplaying it?
So say, just looking at Benjamin, then.
Well, yeah, sorry. But if you look at the front pages, as I said earlier, you would be convinced that there will be winter blackouts this winter. And yet that's not what anyone actually is saying in the smaller print.
I mean, I think the fact that it's a prospect and it was said by the National Grid justifies the concern and the coverage. But on the point of house prices, you know, you heard during the COVID period, which was obviously very unpredictable, at the start of the lockdowns and the serious point of COVID, house prices did fall a bit. There were some not quite bargains, but some good deals to be had. But actually, they continue to rise pretty consistently. And so, you know, I as someone who would like to buy a house, who's not yet a homeowner and lives in a very expensive part of the country, London, you know, I'd be quite glad of an 8 to 10% fall. And the market's completely out of control. The idea that, you know, in the 70s, it was 4 times the average income to buy a house, and now it's 20 times in parts of the country is utterly ludicrous. Yeah,
and I think
of course it is. Think about the cost of a house in London.
Yeah. But I think it's also part of the problem that we've all got used to having an availability of mortgage offers and also cheap money. Let's all be honest. The interest rate has been so artificially low for some time that we've all got very used to that fact. And lenders just allowing you to spend much more than you can realistically afford on a property.
I thought we'd learned this lesson after the last crash.
And you'd think so. And I think we learnt it for a very short period of time. And now we're coming back round to that again. And interest rates are going up to perhaps what they should be and what would normally be a normal sort of interest rate. And I think that we've all got so used to it being quick, available and cheap that we've lost sight of the fact that this is, you know, this is a big purchase. And I think the law of supply and demand will state that house prices are not going to fall by as much as everybody thinks.
No,
there may be some change.
They never do very much.
They don't. I think there's a small variation. But, I mean, what's more concerning is we're not building enough houses. And people who want to get on the property ladder are just not going to have that because of the available stock and the availability of mortgages. So I think we're talking ourselves into a little bit of a frenzy, I think. And yes, it's right to be wary of these kind of costs and the impact that it has on people, but I think that we ought to fall much shorter of saying this is woeful, this is awful, you know, using the word slump and things like that. I think we all have to be a little bit careful. The semantics of it are really, really important. We don't want to frighten people, as you say, Anne, with all of the front pages saying we will
doom, gloom
return.
and disaster.
But it's only worst case scenario.
Well, let's have some what could be positive news, Benjamin, in The Guardian this morning, saying the weather forecast gives us at least the hope of potentially lower bills.
Yes. Now, a bit like Anne's warning earlier, it's hard to predict these things. So the University of Reading, which has done this weather forecast...
Well, they're huge on climatology and stuff, aren't they?
Yeah, but they caveat it with how it's difficult to predict months in advance. But what they're saying is that it's very unlikely that we're going to have a very cold winter like the one we had in 2009-10, which apparently was the coldest of recent years. They say that it might get quite cold in November, December, and then be milder through the latter part of winter next year. And the reason this matters so much is because it's going to save people an awful lot of money if it's a milder winter than a colder winter. In fact, they predict that it's cost £1 billion per degree colder it gets on national energy bills. So, you know, that's a pretty huge difference on what people's cost is going to be.
Hooray for global warming, then.
Yeah, exactly. It's finally paid off. You get a lovely tan in summer and you can afford you might, well, probably can't afford your energy bills in winter. But I think that'll, you know, if that happens, that'll be a relief to people. But at least if they've got this prediction, they can try and plan out when they might put the heating on, because I've not put my heating on yet. But if they say November and December is going to be the only proper cold spell, well, maybe you can justify putting it on for that period.
Talking of the blackouts, that was across all the papers this morning, Francis, I need to do some research into this. Francis says, I installed UPS, uninterruptible power supply devices, when I was living in rural areas to power the TV and broadband, as we used to get occasional outages.
Isn't that when a generator kicks in?
This also maintained telephone and emergency alarms. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, an uninterrupted power source is basically a generator that's programmed to come on if it needs to. It comes on straight away. You don't have to already do it.
Yeah, they use them a lot in computer data centres because you can't have your
So it's going to be expensive then?
I don't know. I mean, it'd be
you've got to have a generator,
to find out. Yes, you've got to run a generator.
And you've got to keep that primed and everything, so everything's
Which is not quite so simple if you're living in an apartment block or something.
No, exactly. I think if you're in a rural cottage somewhere, you can.
You would have the space to be able to do it. It's a really interesting thought, though, that people are now going to that way of thinking that they need to have their own sources of energy coming through. But obviously, if it's a generator, is that being run off of diesel, petrol, that kind of thing? The cost of that isn't exactly cheap.
I know that was the Dish in Australia, the one that provided the television pictures for Apollo 11 when it landed.
Oh,
the Dish. In the movie, I don't know whether this was ever true, in the movie they suddenly run out of power because they have a power blackout just as Neil Armstrong's about to get out onto the moon. And they are the ones that have to deliver the picture back to Earth. And so they have to rely on their UPS, their universal, what is it? Uninterrupted power source, which is a generator.
Oh, right. Oh, well, there you go. You learned something new.
But that's in the middle of nowhere in Australia. So I don't know whether, as you say, it would work in a multi-storey block.
No, probably
in a city in London or something.
It's back to the doom and gloom in the Star, Claire, because nurses are getting a pay rise of
72 pence, according to the Star. I mean, I think this is all part of the wider conversation about the RCN polling their members for strike action.
For the first time in how many years?
106 years.
Wow.
I mean, it is quite serious, but I have a little bit of a problem. This is not going to surprise you with strikes. I don't agree with it. I don't think the RCN need to be looking at strike action when what they want from the government is 5% above inflation increase, which takes it to a pay increase of 17%.
Well, that isn't going to happen.
No, it's not.
It's not, and I think that you have to be realistic. I don't think that people shouldn't get a pay rise. I think that nursing staff and care staff definitely do deserve to have a good salary. But to have an unrealistic amount like that, I think you're just asking for failure and you're asking for people then to take sides, and it becomes a very divisive argument, and I don't think it helps their
Could this be the
cause at
strategy,
all.
simply to get us talking more about it?
And if that is their strategy, then that's a good one.
Then it's working.
It's a good one, it's working, we're all talking about it and we're all paying attention to it. But it's where you draw the line as to where public sympathy will run out, as it has done with train strikes and drivers striking. Everyone's sort of gone, well, hold up a second, we supported you in the first two strikes, you know, now we're down to the 7th or 8th. You can stop, I've had enough. And that's always the worry that you have, is it's going to push too far and the argument turns against you.
Well, of course, that's what's happening with the railway tomorrow. They're on strike again.
Yeah, only 1/5 of trains will be running tomorrow because the RMT, which is 40,000 workers and 15 train networks, are going on strike. And they'll only be running between 7:30am and 6:30pm. So train bosses have said don't travel unless absolutely necessary. But which is clearly a huge disruption, and there'll be people that will miss vital appointments, family, moments, all those sorts of things. But I actually disagree with Claire, because the public support for the train strikes has been much higher than you would have anticipated. When Grant Shapps, who was the Transport Secretary early this year, sort of tried to play games over it, actually the public were largely on side, which surprised many. And of course they are, because everyone is facing a cost of living crisis. People on decent incomes as well as low incomes can't pay their bills. And so when the train staff, and it's not the train drivers asking for the rise, it's other staff, but when they turn around and say we can't afford to pay our bills and raise our kids, actually a lot of people respond and say, yeah, that's a pretty rubbish situation.
All right. Well, look, we need to leave it there. You two, thank you both very much indeed. We'll catch up with you, Claire and Benjamin, a little bit later on. Thank you.
Lots more to come in a couple of moments.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Liz Truss rules out energy-saving campaigns amid power blackout warnings.
Good morning to you. It's 8 o'clock. It's Friday, the 7th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
And we're live across the whole of the UK on both your TV and your radio, and online, of course, as well. Wherever you are, you can take us with you. Here are the top stories this morning.
Well, the Prime Minister has ruled out launching an energy-saving campaign amid warnings that planned blackouts could hit the UK if power plants can't get enough gas to keep running this winter.
Prince Harry, Elton John, David Furnish, Liz Hurley and many others are suing the Daily Mail for breaches of privacy. 7 claims have been issued at the High Court and sent to the Mail headquarters in London. Private investigators allege that landlines were tapped, cars were broken into and homes were bugged.
The big fight between Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr. tomorrow has been called off because of a failed drug test. There was an adverse analytical finding, as they call it, for trace amounts of a female fertility drug found in one of Mr. Benn's recent tests.
And as ever, you can join in any of our discussions by emailing us gbviews@gbnews.uk. Jackie says, I already use candles in storm lamps to save on energy bills as they produce heat and light, and now the price will go up due to panic buying.
Brian says, this is an interesting one, Brian. I have 16 solar panels, but have found out that they don't generate enough in a blackout. So I'll have to get my generator out. I can't work out what to do, but I was looking at... We talked solar panels last week, didn't we? And I got a quote in.
Oh, yeah. Right. How much?
£12,500.
Right.
And it said it would save me, but it didn't say over how long, £80,000.
Yeah, but that's over quite a long period of time.
How long? So it would pay for itself, but over how long?
But you've got to have the money to fork out now, haven't you?
£12,500.
Tell you what, would you be able to get them fitted in time anyway for this winter?
Well, no, probably not.
Tracy says, I bought battery sensor lights. I have them in every room in the house. They're brilliant. And we actually don't need to turn on any lights. They take 3 AAA batteries. The first box of 3 I purchased cost £4.99. The second set went up to £6.50. And now they are £12.99 for the same pack of batteries. Do you know, that doesn't surprise me, but gosh, that's awful.
All I would say on that is shop online. I hate to, because I know a lot of people...
And mass shop
Shop online and buy big sets of batteries, and you can get them a lot cheaper than that, yeah. The more you buy, if you buy like a pack of 24, it's like more money that you're forking out in the first place, but you get them a lot cheaper. That's what I do. I have them in the cupboard.
There you are.
There you go.
Teresa says the problem with 3-hour blackouts is when you're running an online small business. I only just managed to ride out the pandemic and low sales, and now we're going to be hit by a lack of power and become unable to function. It's worrying, even though I'm a child of the 70s.
Yeah, they're talking from 4 till 7 in the evening, which I suppose is not a bad time in some respects.
If you're trying to get the kids bathed and get them in bed and do their homework. Although in the 70s I did my homework by candlelight. Yeah. Remember it well.
Baths by candlelight there. Make it romantic.
You could have hot enough water there. You could have a way of heating the water, haven't you?
Yes, but if you set your timer for middle of the night before, or whatever.
Yeah, but lots of houses now don't have water tanks to hold the hot water, do they? Because they're on those combi boilers that just heat it at the time. It's not going to be easier. Times have changed, haven't they? And I don't know whether we as a society are prepared to put up with the same sort of rubbish that we did in the 70s.
No, probably not.
I don't know whether we are.
Anyway, get your thoughts through gbviews@gbnews.uk. Well, the Prime Minister has ruled against launching an energy-saving public information campaign amid of those warnings about 3-hour rolling blackouts that could be imposed in some parts of the UK in the winter.
Yeah, it's the National Grid saying that consumers could face power outages to ensure that the grid doesn't collapse in the unlikely event that supplies fall. Let's talk now to founder of the Fair Fuel UK, Howard Cox. A very good morning to you, Howard. Good to see you. Well, we've still got an electricity running.
Good morning. Nice to see you again.
Hello. What do you think of this idea that, yes, the National Grid is warning that in a worst-case scenario, blackouts could happen, and at the same time, the Prime Minister doesn't want to be nanny state-ish and doesn't want to tell us how to conserve energy?
Well, who do we believe and what do we do? And this is the important thing. The Fair Fuel UK campaign is primarily for motorists and the lower cost of motoring, lowering tax, etc. The problem we have is, it's not a problem. Well, I've got 1.7 million supporters, and overnight, since this has been announced, I've had something like 600 emails saying, what the hell do we do? And I'm being asked advice about this, and fundamentally, I'm going to say, you've got to watch this space and watch news channels like GB News to make sure you get the right information. The incompetence of this government is absolutely profound. And I just don't know where this is going, because people are sick to death, and the words are being used quite a lot is they are scared, literally scared. Those are the words I'm seeing, and that can't be right.
Well, look, but the campaign, if there was going to be a campaign to inform us about all of this, it's going to cost 15 million quid. Well, I suppose you could use the argument, and that's 15 million quid that'd be better spent elsewhere.
Absolutely right. This is the whole point. And to be fair to Liz Truss, and I have a little bit of sympathy with her, despite the incompetent budget and the jam tomorrow promises, not handling the current cost of living crisis issues or the energy issues, which are sitting there. The fracking idea that we've got to actually have local permission, whereas I think we should be putting fracking in and saying, sorry, we've got to do it without your local permission, but you'll get lots of incentives instead. And as far as the £15 million, that's ridiculous. I should imagine a couple of broadcasting on our public broadcasting service, you could do an advert on there for about £10,000, the whole thing. So I just don't understand where these massive figures come in that, as usual, the taxpayer is funding.
Well, that's the problem in that television isn't what it used to be, and you have to pay for time. And I think the even for charities, the TV companies would all want to charge pretty high for just putting out a message. But there must be a way of disseminating the information without appearing to be nanny state-ish, just appear to be sort of asking people to do their bit.
Well, press releases are free. You can put press releases out. I do it regularly. I don't pay any money to issue a press release. And if the story is actually important enough, it gets published. Sometimes my press releases don't get published, and that's understandable because there are other more important news, perhaps. But this is important top-line news that you can't actually switch on the power in your house, and you're going to be sitting in the black, in the darkness. And I think, newspapers and the media should actually, rally around and make sure that the information we get is not charged at a high rate.
Howard, can I just ask you about something which is closer to home for you, and that is fuel prices. Why is it that you go around the big petrol stations, you go around the supermarket petrol stations, and they're all charging something like $1.67, $1.69 for a litre of petrol. You go around the smaller independent ones that generally tend to charge more, and they're charging $1.55, $1.56. Why is it that they're so much cheaper than the big stations at the moment? And what can we do about it?
Well, you're absolutely right. It's completely topsy-turvy. The whole thing's turned around. Usually the supermarkets used to be cheaper than the small independents. What we're seeing again is the fuel supply chain absolutely ripping us off. Supermarkets, unfortunately, are losing money considerably because the cost of food is going up, cost of etc. So they're not giving us the lovely, encouraging to come into the supermarket offers. Morrison's did one recently, I think, offering 5p if you spend £40. But those sorts of offers aren't happening. The fuel supply chain is unchecked, and that's one of the things we had hoped in the mini budget that Kwasi-Kwarteng would call upon or implement, which most of the Tory backbench MPs agree with, that we need a independent price regulatory we call Pump Watch, similar to Ofcom, Ofwat, Ofgem. We've got all those to protect consumers, but the 37 million drivers who need their vehicle and need this essential resource aren't protected. Pump prices are totally and utterly based on profiteering and how much profit based on the volatile market at the moment. That's what's happening at the moment, and it's completely confused. I'm hoping, and I'm working very hard to convince the government to introduce this body so we get fair and transparent pricing.
Right, well, we'll leave it there. Howard Cox, thanks very much indeed. Do continue to get in touch with us and tell us how you're going to cope. Adrian says, having a 3-hour power cut from 9 p.m. is fine for me, and then I can at least watch GB News until 9. Bless. Thank you.
Oh, well, yes, that's stay on our good side.
We were talking about how to keep the spark in a relationship.
Oh, yes.
There's this woman, Dr. Emily James, who's an expert in love and libido in the United States. She's done a TikTok video which has gone viral with her 5 top tips on how to keep the spark in your relationship. And she says one of the things is don't criticise your partner. That's a big one. Another one is to prioritise intimacy. And it doesn't have to be sex. It can be just intimacy, cuddling, and just showing love, apparently. She says prioritise that. And don't schlep around in your sweatpants every day.
Oh, right.
So in other words, I suppose just sort of keep things up. Is that the right way of putting it? I don't know. But anyway, we'll talk more about how to keep your relationship with its spark. Stop giggling. Maybe that's a good thing too. Have
Giggling,
a giggle.
lots
Have
of
a
laughs.
giggle, I'd say. But
Lots
do
of
get in touch with us, won't you? It's GB News at GBViews at gbnews.uk. What have you found keeps the spark in your relationship?
Yes. Well, now, let's turn our attention to politics. There's something very complicated going on, which I don't really understand. The North Sea Transition Authority have launched their 33rd offshore oil and gas licensing round. It's very complicated. Basically, what it means is they're opening up the licensing for North Sea gas and oil. There's 100 sort of licenses.
Apparently this goes on all the time. But of course, it's very important at the moment while we're all looking so much at fuel and the way we get our energy. We're joined now by Climate Minister MP Graham Stewart, I think. A very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us again. Yeah. Can you explain explain to us basically what this is all about?
Sure. Well, after Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, of course, there's been huge pressures on energy supply and prices around the world, and we have taken steps to protect the consumer, can protect businesses with our energy price guarantee at home, so that on the unit price of electricity or gas, families will see their bills reaching, on average, no more than about £2,500. But we're also looking to the long-term security as well. And today, as you say, the North Sea Transition Authority has announced nearly 900 blocks with a view to perhaps 100 new licenses being issued so that more of the oil and gas, which we will burn in a net zero scenario going up to 2050, is produced here in the UK. And that's good news for a number of reasons. One, it's obviously great for the jobs in the oil and gas industry in the UK. Two, it's good for the economy. The oil and gas businesses are very highly taxed, and that's good for the revenue coming into the exchequer. And three, it's good for our energy security. If I haven't said that already, it's also good for the environment, because oil and gas produced in the UK has much lower emissions around its production than does the stuff that we import from abroad. So replacing imports with UK-produced oil and gas, while nonetheless maintaining our legally obliged trajectory to net zero in 2050, is a win all round for the country, and I'm delighted to see this announcement today.
Look, in all of this, are we talking new licences? Are we talking about new production then, or just relicensing what is already being produced?
We're talking about new licenses, so I think there's 4 that are quite close to existing infrastructure, so they can be prioritised and come on sooner. As I say, the great news is that our production has, because of the professional levels that you'd expect to be required in the UK, have lower flaring or other issues that create emissions around production. We've got some of the most environmentally friendly, that doesn't sound too contradictory, oil and gas production in the world, and therefore that's good for us going forward for all those reasons I've given. But at the same time, of course, and when I was appointed to this job just a few weeks ago, I asked the boss, the Prime Minister, what my task was. She said to accelerate the expansion of offshore wind, in which of course we lead the world, accelerate solar, accelerate nuclear, and on all these fronts we're looking to make sure that we're less vulnerable in future to the global energy price that we've seen causing such difficulties to everybody everywhere. And it's just fortunate that although we have a winter with more risk coming up than we've seen in previous years, we've actually got one of the most diverse and strong energy supply systems in Europe. And that's why the National Grid say it's very unlikely that we'll see the blackouts which are dominating front pages and news headlines this morning.
How are these licences awarded? I mean, last time we heard of the acceleration of licensing because of a need, it was PPE during the pandemic, which we later found were handed to sort of in a questionable way to people who supported the Tories or who were Tory friends. How can we be sure this isn't going to happen this time?
Well, I don't think, Anne, I'm not an expert on the PPE issue, and I'm not sure that any such allegations, it's easy to make those slurs, but I'm not sure that they've been substantiated, and I'm sure you, Anne, least of all among journalists, would want to repeat slurs without evidential base. But it is possible to accelerate, but nonetheless go through a proper process and a rigorous process, and that's what we've got. We have among the highest standards in the whole world around the production. That's why our emissions, as independently verified, are among the lowest in the world around our production. So no, I think viewers can be confident that our system, albeit accelerated, is nonetheless rigorous and delivers the highest standards.
It's all for the longer term, of course, and it's fine that we're looking at that. We need that energy security. We are concerned about what is happening this winter. I mean, although you said it's very unlikely we'll see these rolling blackouts, it has been suggested by the National Grid. Shouldn't we be having some sort of, as Jacob Rees-Mogg apparently wants, some sort of information campaign to get us all to be more energy efficient, to reduce the strain on the National Grid? Shouldn't we be looking at something like that?
Well, we are always encourage people to be more energy efficient. We've got a £6 billion programme across this Parliament investing in energy efficiency, insulation and the like. The Chancellor just the other day in his fiscal statement supported Eco Plus and these other programmes to do more on that front. So we're always encouraging people to use energy more efficiently. It helps lower bills, it's good for the climate and the like. But in terms of our, the energy supply challenges for this winter, actually it's more about the peak, and that's why we're working with Ofgem. We've supported them in talking to big commercial gas users about a voluntary scheme there where they may, be paid in extremis to reduce their usage, and that will then reduce the strain on the system, create the flex, and likewise look to make use of the smart meters, which I was looking at mine this morning, being pleased it hadn't gone up more than I thought it might, and use that kind of technology in people's homes to allow people, again voluntarily, to reduce their energy use at the peak. A more general campaign, although, as I say, we have general information saying be efficient with energy, a more general campaign might make people think that, not having a bath at 2 in the afternoon was going to help the country with its energy security. And given the nature of our system, that's not really true. But I would always encourage people to use energy as efficiently as possible, and I think everyone knows that right now, given the prices.
Yeah, indeed. Graham Stewart, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Yes, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just to answer that point of possible Tory cronyism when it came to the awarding of certain PPE contracts, of course, that is something that is going to be looked into, but they were very clear allegations of just that, and that will be investigated by the new COVID investigation, the inquiry that's just been launched, going to take years, apparently.
Things like that do take years, don't they? It's interesting. I mean, do you agree with what Graham Stewart was saying about not having, no need for a sort of campaign? 50 million quid is what's been quoted on that. A lot of people saying, well, it's nanny state. Do we have the common sense? Are we learning enough from the headlines? This is just the Mirror because it's the closest one to me. It's in all the papers this morning. Return to the Dark Ages, it says there. Are we getting enough of that? Are we being conscious enough about... I mean, I have to say, I am. I'm very conscious now of not having the heating on, or if it goes on, it's just going on for an hour just to take the edge off, and then reducing it, not leaving any lights on, being on. We all being conscious of that, aren't we?
Yes, and we wouldn't do that if programmes like this and the press didn't actually cover the cause. You can't keep shooting the messenger,
No, but it is interesting that we're all being very, all much more aware
more conscious, yeah, absolutely. Good thing too.
Anyway, let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk. If you want to use the electricity to power your internet, to send us an email.
Yes, while you can.
It costs you a fraction of a penny, I think, to do that. Now, Prince Harry, Sir Elton John and other celebrities are suing the publisher of the Daily Mail, the Mail on Sunday and the Mail Online.
The legal action claims to have compelling evidence of gross breaches of privacy by associated newspapers.
Yeah, the publisher has responded to the allegations. It's called them preposterous smears.
Well, joining us now is the principal of South Courage, Durham University, and leading opponent of the so-called Hacked Off campaign, Professor Tim Luckhurst. A very good morning to you. Lovely to talk to you. What do you think of this, what appears to be almost a mass action?
Well, I think it's a colossal fishing trip, which is seeking to reopen the Leveson inquiry and to drag in to the cause of press regulation a newspaper group which was entirely exonerated in the original Leveson inquiry. I suspect that these complainants have less evidence than that they actually claim, and that what they want to do is to seek to find evidence. It's very interesting that they say that they're united in their desire to live in a world where the press act freely but responsibly. In other words, they're in favour of a state-regulated press. Associated Newspapers has always been opposed to state regulation. I agree with Associated Newspapers about that, and I'll be very interested to see whether these claims ever actually reach court, because the denial from Associated Newspapers is emphatic and very, very clear.
It is emphatic, absolutely. But I mean, you say it could be a fishing expedition. It'd be a very expensive one, surely.
Yes, and these are very wealthy people who are not, in that sense, people who would be reluctant to use their funds to make an ideological case. Now, that may not be the case, but the allegations that they are making involve criminality on a truly serious scale. They are suggesting that Associated Newspapers knew that people were intercepting live telephone calls in order to provide information to a newspaper. Now, the interception of live telephone calls is a criminal offence. In order to do that legally, you need a warrant from the Home Secretary, or if you're in Scotland, from the Secretary of State for Scotland. I think it is extremely high level of evidence that they would require to demonstrate that Associated Newspapers knew that such things were being done. Whether private investigators have done such things and tried to sell them to newspapers is an interesting question. I don't think that's inconceivable, but it's a very long stretch between saying that private investigators may have done something illegal and tried to sell the evidence to a newspaper, and proving that the newspaper commissioned such work. And I'd be astonished if Associated had been that foolish. It is a very, very successful newspaper company, not least because millions of people like its products. And one of the things that one has to remember when attacking such newspapers is that when you attack the Daily Mail or the Mail on Sunday, or newspapers that millions of Britons enjoy and read because they want the information and news they convey, you're also attacking the judgment of their readers. And I think one of the greatest problems with this sort of campaign is that it is in fact showing contempt for the readers of these newspapers who enjoy them and appreciate them.
The readers of such newspapers do want to rely on the efficacy and the quality of the journalism involved. And we found with earlier newspapers and with the hacking inquiry right going back to Millie Dowler, we did find that certain journalists hadn't done things to the high enough standard that their readers would expect. So surely if these complainants feel they have a case, they have a right to get on with it, don't they?
Well, no one's denying them the right to get on with it. I'm saying that it will be a difficult case to prove and that it will be an expensive case to prove. But Anne, you're absolutely right. Of course, News UK, the publisher of The Sun and the former News of the World, now The Sun on Sunday, The Times, etc., has spent 15 years negotiating with and reaching out of court settlements with people whose phones were hacked. We know that that has been established. We know that that was a consequence of the hacking inquiry, and we know that these cases exist. But as I have made clear, although attempts were made to draw Associated Newspapers into that allegation at the time, they failed and failed utterly. Nobody found any evidence whatsoever that Associated had been guilty of those offences, and I think that it is unlikely that such evidence will be demonstrated of the more serious offences of which they're accused now. However, of course, we live in a free country, and if people can afford to bring civil actions of this kind, they are entitled so to do. Their evidence will be tested in court. If it reaches the level of criminality which they're suggesting, I suspect at some point it might reach a criminal court. And if it reached a criminal court, then they'd have to prove it beyond reasonable doubt, not just on the basis of probability. Let's see what happens. At the moment, what we have are allegations which are emphatically denied and indeed described as slanderous by the Mail. I think that's very interesting.
OK. Tim Luckhurst, good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Interesting.
But as was pointed out a bit earlier to us, actually, I mean, Prince Harry is one of the complainants, and he has won cases against the Daily Mail before. So, but as we have to say, obviously, to cover ourselves legally, the Mail absolutely refute these charges and say they are smears and an attempt to pull them into the sort of hacking inquiry that did see the shutting down of the News of the World.
Well, we'll keep a close eye on that, as everyone will keep a close eye on that one, I should think. It'll be all across the papers. Now, the Prime Minister has called on European leaders to unite on energy and the economy amid an escalating sense of Russian aggression.
Liz Truss also urged the group to address the fundamental causes of energy and migration challenges and strengthened relationships with French President Emmanuel Macron, who she called a friend now, as they announced plans to work together to tackle migration.
Well, let's talk to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who's in Prague, where that meeting took place last night. And we heard from the Prime Minister last night. I mean, she is trying to warm relations a little bit, particularly with the French, isn't she?
Yeah, it really is, actually. It's been quite a change in tone in many regards and what we've experienced over the last couple of years, firmly saying that Emmanuel Macron is a friend, even though she suggested during the summer that that was open to question. And it has been a very, very deliberate attempt by the British to try and cosy up to the French on a whole series of issues, not least of all because, frankly, they're quite important to get through some very difficult periods. Let's look at one of them. When you look at energy supply, we've heard from the National Grid, you guys have been talking about it this morning, those possible power cuts. Well, Liz Truss's argument this week is that our country cannot go through the same thing year after year after year, that things like nuclear power stations need to be built, and the French are a nuclear powerhouse in Europe. Their involvement will be crucial in places like Sizewell C, for example, and potentially elsewhere. Migration, another key issue. Clearly that crisis in the English Channel involving those small boats. Again, and yes, we've been here before, we've done deals, there's been frustrations, but a realisation within government that really this can only genuinely be sorted out, be dealt with, get those numbers down with further French cooperation. And so there is going to be a France-UK summit next year. The Interior Ministers, the Home Secretary and the Interior Minister in France are going to set out a plan of migration, we think, sometime this autumn. And also there is going to be that greater cooperation when it comes to nuclear energy. So very much cozying up. Also, must be said, a pretty successful trip, I think, for Liz Truss at this European political community meeting here in Prague. Brexit had an effect on our relationship with energy and our interconnectedness with the European market. Well, Britain has now rejoined the North Sea Energy Cooperation Group. What does that effectively means? That we're kind of plugging ourselves back into a degree into the Northwest Europe energy supply, and that could have big consequences in terms of trying to ease some of the pressure this autumn and winter. And Liz Truss has even gone as far as saying that the UK is going to host this meeting in 2024. So, you know what, this is a very, very different approach, and maybe a sense that in the years to come, if she makes it that far, that the relationship with Europe, yes, will not be like the European Union relationship, but it will be done on a much more cordial basis than we've seen over the last couple of years. So in many ways, Liz Truss had a pretty good time here in Prague, on the continent, not usual for British Prime Ministers, but going home to all those troubles back in London. They, certainly within the party, have not gone away.
OK, Darren, thank you very much indeed. Should we talk too? Because David Mellor's just come into the studio. So should we talk to you, David?
About You've got nothing better to do.
Well,
you
Liz,
can talk to me.
Isn't it interesting that Liz Truss has a new friend now in Emmanuel Macron?
Yeah, but you see, the trouble is, I don't believe all this stuff. You know, people meet and they get on well. But, you know, Macron has his own agenda, and she's not going to change that. But if she's got to have any future as a Prime Minister, it will be because she can change attitudes. I mean, I thought it was in many ways almost more significant that she got on so well with the Deputy Prime Minister of Ireland, who's about to become Prime Minister again under that coalition deal. I mean, what she's got to be able to do is to show that she can be a stateswoman, that she can actually make a difference with some of these long-running, nagging problems. And, you know, Boris...
Well, it looks like we're going to get some movement on the Northern Ireland Protocol.
Yeah, that's the point, you see. You're absolutely right. Because Boris, at the end of the day, signed off on a Northern Ireland Protocol because he wanted to get Brexit done. And being Boris, he didn't give a whatever as to what kind of difficulty was going to be left with a border, effectively, down the Irish Sea. And if she could tackle that, because, you know, otherwise, I'm afraid, with Liz Truss, it doesn't look very promising, does it? I mean, if I had a ranch, would I bet it on Liz Truss remaining Prime Minister?
At the moment, if you look at the pictures, she's I mean, she's standing at the back in the group photograph, which is interesting. But she's there and she's doing her bit and she's obviously getting on with them. She has a better rating abroad at the moment than at home. Will that help her, actually?
I mean, the problem for her is that she's thrown in at the deep end. And, of course, she's thrown in at the deep end. I always think there's one figure, you know, all these figures. And when I was at the bar, my people must admit, in every case, there's one fact. You've just got to grasp it, and then it all falls into place. But I've decided, probably wrongly, as usual, that the one fact is, so far as Liz Truss is concerned, when they had the first poll for Conservative leader, she got 50 votes. And Sunak was always right out ahead. For a variety of reasons, she is now the Prime Minister. But does she have the support on the back benches that will get her through this? And the answer is no. And she hasn't helped herself by, instead of putting her arms around Sunak and putting her arms around other people and saying, you know, Margaret Thatcher was, I mean, I was her minister in her government for 9 years. She was a difficult woman. I mean, she used to treat me with even more contempt than my mother did, which was saying something. But the thing about Margaret Thatcher was, when 4 people stood against her for leadership of the Conservative Party, all 4 of them were put on her front bench. She might not have liked them, and the things she used to say about them, but they were there. And Liz Truss seemed to want to get rid of people for no better reason.
But she can get people on board, can't she, if she starts to deliver?
Exactly.
So now she's got a tight time frame to do that. But if things start to get delivered by the new year, that could make a big difference, couldn't it?
Well, it would make a huge difference, and that's why...
Give her that long?
Oh, I don't think they can get rid of it. Look, let's be quite clear about this. Turkeys don't vote for an early Christmas. I mean, that GB News poll yesterday, was it show 33% Labour lead?
32, yeah.
And the fact of the matter is that if they decided to get rid of Liz Truss, you couldn't just go through that farcical leadership election again. You'd have to have a general election. And at the moment, yeah, a turkey's got a better chance of surviving Christmas than the Tory party have of surviving a general election.
Yeah.
So how long do they wait?
Well, I mean, they've got another 2 years.
Well, yes, but do they fight another general election with Liz Truss there if she hasn't completely proved herself?
I think she's got a period of time when she can show she can make a difference. But, you know, what is the real Liz Truss? I don't know. Is the real Liz Truss the person who seemed to get on very well with Varadkar and, you know, Macron? I wouldn't trust a snake-like person.
Well, clearly she wouldn't either.
But the point is, in relation to Liz Truss, is the Liz Truss who says you can't tell people what to do about heating because somehow that's kind of patronising, or it's running an authoritarian government. If she's got those kind of weird views, she's not going to find it easy. But yeah, I don't know Liz Truss. Almost nobody knows Liz Truss. What's she going to turn out to be? It's odd to have a Prime Minister about whom we all know so little.
Yeah, it's very true. David, we've got to leave it there, sadly. Thank you very much indeed.
Much more to come, including the results from GB News' People's Poll. How did you vote, if you were asked?
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
OK, it is 8:37. Time now for a look at the GB News People's Poll.
Yes. Well, it was very interesting because we asked all of these people who they would vote for if there was a general election tomorrow. And if we can have a look at the graphic, it shows that the gap, and we were talking about this just a couple of moments ago, between Labour and the Conservatives is pretty big. 32%.
Yes, David Mellor is still here. David, I mean, that is, I mean, it's exaggerated, isn't it? If there was going to be a general election, that would tighten considerably.
But it's terrible.
It is terrible.
When John Major won the 1992 election, shortly after that, there was a collapse in the Tories, the confidence people had in the Tories on economic policy because we had to leave the ERM. And, you know, that drove the Conservatives' poll rating down drastically. And even though it was then a successful period in government, Ken Clarke was a good chance and all the rest of it, they never got it back. And the worrying thing for the Conservatives is that level of lack of confidence, it's going to take a miracle. And they've only got 2 years.
Yeah, it is going to take a while to work through. Also in this People's Poll, we asked about police officers. Right, have a look at this one. 58% of the panel said police officers should remain politically neutral, and only 16% said they should make political gestures like taking the knee. Well, let's get a view on that from Hamish Brown, who's formerly of Scotland Yard. Hamish, good to see you, as always. What do you make of people's take on what the police are doing at the moment?
Yeah, good to see you, Stephen and Anne. Well, it's of no surprise to me, and as soon as they get rid of this wokery and the symbolic gestures, the better. They are there to fight crime, and I support comments, notably from the Home Secretary, that reminding them that the public want them to do something about an appalling crime rate. And in fact, yesterday there were the most alarming figures coming out on the most sensitive crimes, that is domestic burglary. What an intrusion, someone breaking into your house. So, yes, concentrate on that and really, yes, be respectful to people, make sure people's rights, civil rights of freedom of expression, they're protected. But really, you're there to fight crime, so get on with it.
Do you address both sides of the coin, though? On the one hand, you have a police force like the Met being accused of being institutionally racist, so clearly they've got to, as some would actually say, go woke on that. They've got to address something that important, or being sexist, or the way they treat people, and also trying to fight crime. How do you deliver both from one police force?
Yes, it's quite simple. It's a matter of professional standards, and those are the people who deal with complaints, funnily enough, professional standards. But that's what it is. It's being rude to people, being sexist, racist is totally unacceptable, and in some circumstances could actually be a criminal offence, particularly the racial side. But they've got to get that balance right, and they are there to fight crime. They're not there to act as cowboys or have a cavalier attitude to life. They're there to get it right, and that's what the public want to see the police out there properly tasked when they go to residential burglaries. And shock horror, Chief Constable have come out recently and said, look, they're going to visit every burglary. Well, they should be doing that in the first place and knocking next door and did you see anything, and checking the back garden in case the burglars left a clue there. What about the forensic side? What about the CCTV? What about the cameras on doorbells? Those sort of things, not telling the public. They should make an insurance claim and make those inquiries themselves. But that is not the way forward.
But Hamish, are we getting a little bit too worked up about throwing our cups of tea at the TV when we see pictures of police officers dancing at, I don't know, the Notting Hill Carnival or whatever? I mean, is that necessarily a bad policing, in the sense it's trying to integrate with a community who, historically don't trust
show they're
the police?
human beings?
Yes, that's right. And issues like the Notting Hill Carnival, I think that the police generally come across quite well, whereas 30 years ago they were involved in riots. So things have gone along a long way. But what the Home Secretary has spoken about is symbolic gestures, and those can go. I think taking the knee, that doesn't look very impartial to me, and they should be getting on with their job and being polite to people when they come across them, be as helpful as possible. Being there in the first place, they have a lot on the plate, the police, so they can't be all over the place all the time. But certainly having that presence and making their presence felt and making the public feel confident. I don't think there is that at the moment, fighting crime, which isn't necessarily the police's fault, because they've got too much on their plate. All these demands coming in, which they have to deal with one way or another. But it is a matter of leadership, and it is a matter of the right training. It's quite alarming that the very young officers who are on their own, who are attending calls, unsupervised, and I'm not sure they're getting the support they should. So I think it's something the police can work on. A lot on their plate, but please concentrate on the crime. You're there to deal with crime. Certainly take notice of wokery. You're quite right to mention the things you have done, but that must not be at the expense of dealing with crime altogether.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. David Mellor, always a pleasure to see you as well. Thank you both very much for that. We've got more coming up in just a couple of minutes, including a look through the papers.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens,
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne. It is 8:45.
Yeah, we're going to go through the newspapers now. And we were going to show you some of the headlines from the front pages, but basically they're all saying how we're going to have terrible winter blackouts. But there is a huge proviso to that, because that is a worst-case scenario of a worst-case scenario.
Yes.
Most of the experts seem to be agreeing today. However, we've got Claire Pearsall with us and Benjamin Butterworth to have a look at the stories in more detail. And Claire, you were talking about Leeds. are taking a bit of an extreme attitude to the energy crisis.
Yeah, they are the latest city to cancel their Christmas market, bonfire and fireworks evenings due to budget pressures.
Budget pressures.
Budget pressures. But then when you look at it, Leeds City Council said it couldn't spare the £200,000 it needed to run its 6 bonfire night events. Now, I think that do they need 6 necessarily? I think that's probably quite hefty. And
well, I suppose it's a big region, isn't it? If you only do one, where do you do it?
What about the Christmas markets, though? Because surely that's important important for small businesses, for those independent retailers and all that sort of thing.
But it does feel as if some of the market traders that are coming over from the EU, and there are some visa concerns. Now that obviously we don't have the freedom of movement, and it looks like it's Frankfurt people coming over to do the sort of German Christmas market feel. But I agree with you. I think it's brilliant for local businesses to come out to these
and for the community.
Of course,
they're lovely community events.
They are. My village holds a firework evening, and it is just run by volunteers. We all pay a ticket to be there, which is not that expensive, and it's one of the really lovely evenings where the whole village actually just turns out. Nobody's having Facebook disputes with each other, and it's a stunning evening. It's one of those things that I think brings everybody together, and it's talked about for days afterwards, and everybody has their photos up. So I think it's a real shame, but I can understand that £200,000 for a council to spend at the moment is
a lot of money.
excessive.
It is.
It's understandable, but you wonder whether they can ticket it, because at the same time, surely you could cover that cost by just, £2-3 for those people. I think back to when I grew up in a village in the northwest, and bonfire night, you'd always go out, all the village would come out and celebrate that and get together. It's a real moment. And, Manchester's Christmas markets are usually absolutely rammed with people, and it's really small businesses that fill those out. They all have tiny little,
sheds. Stalls.
Sheds, all get the sheds out. I know, I like a Christmas market.
Oh, Christmas markets are lovely.
But I think there's a big difference between a village bonfire, which is just organised, and then these bigger events in towns and
where they spend a fortune on fireworks.
And it's all healthy.
It's literally money going up in smoke at the moment.
They do, and you're looking at the sort of numbers here. An event in Roundhay Park, which is normally open to 70,000 spectators. So my village only has 6,500 people. So I appreciate it's on a different scale, but 70,000. I think you have the expense of the fireworks. You also have the security to keep people safe and stop any.
It's a big question, isn't it, as we face Christmas? Well, we're talking about power outages, the possibility of, we're talking about the cost of living crisis. Do we cancel Christmas? No, we don't cancel it, clearly, and we've been through years of that, haven't we? Do we just sort of pull back on Christmas this year?
Downsize.
And I think you're right. I think we all do need to look at perhaps what we used to do. Maybe we don't need such sort of glitzy markets. I don't want councils to become fun police by saying, well, we can't have it. I think that communities need it. Inner cities probably more so, given the stresses and strains on that kind of living at the moment. So maybe we ought to go almost back to basics, not have quite so glitzy Christmas markets, maybe have more local traders coming out.
Sounds like an election slogan there.
Does it? I could lend that out to someone.
And to be fair,
you did very well.
If you're at a bonfire, at least you can keep warm for the evening.
Yes. Only those at the front, I've always noticed, let's talk about the National Health Service and what they're going to do about patients who miss appointments.
Well, this is an idea that's been briefed to The Sun. I think it strikes me as not a bad idea, that basically there's 7 million people on the waiting list for an operation. 338,000 of those have been waiting more than a year. And so NHS bosses are suggesting that if you turn down 2 appointments, then you'll be taken off the proper list, the main list, and other people will be fast-tracked in front of your place. So if you don't make the effort to turn up, to be flexible with your time to get the NHS appointment, then other people can take it.
Yeah.
I think that's fair enough.
Yeah, I do. I mean, how many times have we sat there in a GP's waiting room previously, or in a hospital waiting room, and names were called out and people just turn up. And I think if you really want the treatment, it doesn't matter if it's inconvenient to you. The fact is you're going to get that treatment.
I had a physio appointment made for me when I was suffering with my knee, and I totally forgot to keep the appointment. And they wrote me a really snotty text saying, you missed your appointment. Geez, that's it. You're off. And I think that's fair enough. And if I want to go back to them, I've got to absolutely grovel by the sound of it.
Yes.
But I actually thought that was fair treatment.
Yeah, well,
It was my fault.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people think, well, it's free, it's not costing me anything, but it does cost. It costs people time, and other people could have taken that appointment if you didn't want it.
Exactly. I was in A&E on Tuesday. It wasn't me, it was my husband. But I was just looking at the picture, 8 hours and 15 minutes was the waiting time. And you just think, you know, that's where we are, and that's...
In A&E?
In A&E, 8 hours and 15 minutes.
Gosh.
But that's what you've got to... You know, if that's where we are now, then we need to really crack down on... And I know it's slightly different in A&E, but we need to crack down on people who are not turning up for appointments or whatever. For whatever, something's got to be done.
But actually, people go to A&E because
they can't get an appointment. I know.
But, you know, Therese Coffey, the health secretary, she said in her speech at Conservative Party conference that she, in June of this year, waited 9 hours in A&E and then was told to come back the next day. And she knew that her ailment couldn't be resolved the next day. She needed to sort it out faster. So she just went to another hospital and did the sitting process again in their A&E. So, you know, 8 hours, 15 minutes is almost a decent time compared to what some people get.
Though,
it is scary. Yeah.
Who's got a very big Uber bill?
So this is a chef who was charged £35,000 for a 15-minute Uber journey.
How?
The driver mixed up the town. He was going from Hyde to Ashton-under-Lyne, and the driver somehow confused it with a town of the same name 10,000 miles away near Adelaide in South Australia.
Right.
Now, it does kind of beg the question, what was the driver
thinking?
Yeah, what was he thinking? Because when you put something into a navigation system, it comes up with a big map and it tells you how long it's going to take to get there and how many miles and all the rest of it. Surely he didn't sort
of thought, how am I going to do that journey?
Yeah, and he didn't think. So obviously the poor man involved, his bank didn't let the £35,000 go through. Didn't have that cleared in his account, strangely, and have since charged him £10.73 for the journey and apologised. But I do think that it's incumbent upon these companies to put safeguards in so things like that can't happen. I can understand...
But also if you accept an Uber journey, you get quoted and then you have to accept it.
And I think that
the guy shouldn't have accepted it.
He'd been quoted £10, which is what he accepted. And then when the driver turned up, somehow there was a confusion on the system.
Yes.
You do sort of think that there should be something built in that doesn't take you out of the United Kingdom 10,000 miles away.
They should have let him have the journey for free after that. Never mind still charging him.
I tell you what, you've got to watch out though when you do tap something in. I was at a restaurant once and they brought the little thing that you put your card in.
Oh, yes.
And I tapped my PIN number and then put that in as a tip.
Oh.
4-figure PIN number, remember? And it was the waitress actually said, "Are you sure you want to tip that much? You know, several £1,000s." And I, oh no, it was my PIN number. I put it in at the wrong point. So be very careful. Yeah, they were able to delete these.
Yes.
Honestly.
Wow, I'm glad she noticed though.
Do you know what I hate?
Honest.
Is that I use the contactless, and they put the machine towards you, so you just see the bit you tap. You don't.
Oh yes, yeah.
And I said, no, turn it round. I want to see the figure that you're going to.
Yeah, I've noticed.
Be very careful these days, don't you?
I've noticed. Look, thank you both. It's been very good to see you both this morning, Claire and Ben.
Yes, thank you very much.
I just have to say, on saving energy, Ian's been in touch. Why not have a ban on electronic advertising? You know, those big billboards.
You mean those huge... Yes.
You see, that would save a lot of money.
Well, would it?
Well,
I wonder. They are all over the place.
If they were all turned off, I mean, each one wouldn't save a lot of money.
They provide revenue, don't they, though? Those advertisers are paying revenue to the people who own the advertising hoardings and whatever. Everything has a knock-on effect.
Yeah. Kathleen says, why can't the utility companies pay for a campaign on the blackouts? Turkey's voting for Christmas, though, isn't it? As they're making the money out of us, why should we have to pay for it? David in Burgess Hill says, I support the winter blackouts. I need all the help I can get to get the kids off the tablets. Yeah, well, yeah. It's nice to take a brighter...
Talking about relationships, though, Elisa in Chelmsford said, never mind keeping the spark in a relationship, just trying to find someone to have a relationship with is hard enough.
Especially if you're using an online app and there's a power cut.
Yeah, oh dear.
You don't stand a chance.
See the knock-on effect?
Oh, you see, it's all there. And look, don't go anywhere. We've got all the top stories heading away in just a minute after the weather.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Spell of heavy rain moving south through the day today. Either side of that, there'll be some sunny spells, but there'll be some gusty winds too. That spell of rain, courtesy of this weather front slowly sinking its way south. It's making for a pretty wet start out there this morning. Parts of southern Scotland and Northern Ireland, and fairly smartly spreading now into parts of northern England too. It's a fairly lively weather front, so some quite heavy bursts of rain, and it'll push into parts of North Wales, northwest England by the end of the morning. Behind that, brighter skies for eastern Scotland, plenty of showers for western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Further south, 1 or 2 showers, but much of East Anglia and the southeast will be dry for most of the day. Another pretty mild day here as well, despite the breeze 18 or 19. But this narrow band of rain pushes across the Midlands, southwest England later on. Not lasting too long, but it could be pretty intense, and it will be around across East Anglia and the southeast for this evening's rush hour. So just bear that in mind if you're heading away this Friday evening. It does clear through, and then many places having clear spells tonight. So there'll be some showers keeping going in western Scotland, and some coming in from the Irish Sea into northwest England. But the winds ease off overnight as well. That will allow it to turn quite chilly, actually, a colder night than the one just gone. We're down into single figures for most to start the weekend. So a fresh start on Saturday, but by and large a sunny start. There will be through the day a few showers coming into western Scotland, maybe the odd one for Northern Ireland, northwest England too, but actually for most places looking like a decent day tomorrow with sunny spells for the majority, and temperatures after a chilly start getting up to about average come the afternoon, generally into the teens. So the weekend mostly starting dry and fine, and certainly for most of England and Wales it will stay that way into Sunday as well. But we are looking at a change with outbreaks of rain coming into parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Liz Truss rules out energy-saving campaigns amid a power blackout warning.
Good morning. It's 9 o'clock on Friday, the 7th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
We're live across the whole of the UK. We're on your TV, your radio and online. So wherever you are, take us with you today. These are your top stories.
The Prime Minister has ruled out launching an energy-saving campaign amidst warnings that planned blackouts could hit the UK if power plants can't get enough energy to keep running.
Prince Harry, Elton John, David Furnish, Liz Hurley and others are suing the Daily Mail for breaches of privacy. 7 claims have been issued at the High Court. Private investigators allege landlines were tapped, cars broken into and homes were bugged.
The big fight between Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr. on Saturday, tomorrow, has been called off due to a failed drugs test. An adverse analytical finding for trace amounts of a fertility drug was found in one of Benn's recent tests by the Voluntary Anti-Doping Association.
Love to hear from you this morning. We're going to go through a lot of your views in just a few minutes. Get in touch, join in. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Brian's got in touch. Morning, Brian. He says, it makes me laugh to listen to the panic on the potential power cuts this winter. I managed a hotel with 3 steak restaurants and 6 liquor bars in York at the time of the power cuts in the 1970s. The power would go off and out. The power would go off and out came the candles and hurricane lamps, and the sitting diners completed their meals in a very romantic setting. All that is needed is a cool head and lots of advanced planning.
I like that. I like that.
Practical.
The attitude we need, let's be positive about whatever's going to go on this winter. Meanwhile, amidst all of these concerns about power cuts, the Prime Minister has ruled out launching an energy-saving public information campaign, I suppose, to prepare us for the limited potential of some blackouts across the UK this winter.
Yeah, it's the National Grid that has said that we could face power outages if the grid, to make sure basically that the grid doesn't collapse in the unlikely event that a lot of things happen at the same time. We don't have enough wind, we've got a shortage of gas supplies from Europe maybe, other things like that. If it all happens together, there could be a crisis. But it is just said in that way. The headlines today are a little more dramatic. Well, earlier on this subject, we spoke to Climate Minister Graham Stewart.
That although we have a winter with more risk coming up than we've seen in previous years, we've actually got one of the most diverse and strong energy supply systems in Europe. And that's why the National Grid say it's very unlikely that we'll see the blackouts which are dominating front pages and news headlines this morning.
Well, let's talk to energy consultant Catherine Porter, who joins us now. Catherine, good morning to you. I mean, do we really expect there to be these rolling blackouts this winter?
No, I think it's the case that this is going to be a very unlikely scenario, and it would only really happen if there was some disruption to our gas supplies. And at the moment, that's not really expected.
However, we are vulnerable from that point of view, not because we buy our gas from Russia, but because everything's interrelated, and we do rather rely on what's happening in other countries in Europe when it comes to gas.
We do. I mean, we get some gas imports from Europe in the winter, but most of our gas comes from the North Sea, from our own production and importing from Norway. And then we get quite a large amount from LNG as well. So as long as all those sources behave in the normal way, then we should be fine for gas supplies.
In terms of our own personal usage, I mean, it does make sense to reduce our usage, not only to save money on the bills, of course, which will make a difference, but also to alleviate stress and strain on the national grid as well. Do you think we need a campaign to tell us to do that, or have we all got enough common sense?
Well, I think that there's one of the measures that can be taken to avoid those blackouts is to have that kind of campaign. So while I don't think we'll have blackouts, I think we might see different types of blackout prevention measures. So the first one was announced yesterday by National Grid, this new demand response service where businesses and households will get paid to move their consumption around. Now, that is a little bit of a blunt tool because it has to be notified on the day ahead. But the next step after that would be National Grid asking businesses to stop consuming, and that would be less voluntary, if you like. That would be a mandatory curtailment to protect households. And then the final step would be the next step after that would be asking the public for voluntary reductions. And we've seen this in the US this summer, in Texas and California, where officials would say, well, we need you to reduce your demand between these hours, and these are the steps you can take. And if we got to that point, then of course we'd need a campaign to educate the public on what they need to do and when.
Wouldn't it be a good idea to have a campaign now, so there isn't a crisis?
Well, unfortunately, the way that the electricity market works is very much moment to moment, because you can't really store electricity. You have to match supply and demand in real time. So if everybody started to do these measures now, but then they got bored with them in a few weeks or months' time, it might be that by January, when that's the period of the highest risk, they'd already stopped doing it. So I think it's better to wait until we need those measures to have the most impact.
Okay, well, thanks for your advice. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Actually, we were talking a bit earlier on about an uninterrupted power source, which I thought was about generators. But actually, we've had Kevin, Mark, Martin, Leon and Adrian all emailed in to explain most UPSs now, uninterrupted power sources, are big battery packs that charge from the power when on and then provide power without a generator in the event of an outage. So you can even buy them on Amazon.
I was just looking.
You were looking?
I was looking now. Various prices, and I suppose they have different capacities, don't they? But it's quite nice. So you just put it in between the item you want to power and it sort of breaches the gap. So
that one looks huge.
Well, I don't know how big this one is, but it's £380. But that is the more expensive.
Alan's also got in touch. He says you can buy something called a power station. They are brought in various sizes, and they'll power your router phones and laptops for 3 to 4 hours for approximately £150.
Yeah.
Do you know, we were learning about air fryers the other day. Now we're learning about UPSs. I suppose anyone in business probably knows that these things exist. Most of us have never had to think of it because we just rely on being able to plug into the plug-in, you know, the socket in the wall, don't we? And you get a reliable source.
It's hilarious, though, that you say, just do a quick Google on it, and
it's there.
There are hundreds of
if you know the words
types
to use. Anyway, they are UPS, that's uninterrupted power source, or, as Alan says, power stations.
Yeah.
So if you've got the money to it would keep you going. Would it keep your internet going?
Well, yes, if you plugged your router into that and then that into the wall, it would keep it all going. Yeah. So there you go. It's worth doing, but it's having the money to fork out for it in the first
place. Absolutely. So although I'm sure a lot of people would consider it, as indeed so many people have been buying air fryers.
Yeah.
I've heard nothing but air fryers all week from everybody.
I know. Terrible, still haven't got one. It's 8 minutes past 9 now. Prince Harry, Sir Elton John, several other celebrities are suing the publisher of the Daily Mail, the Mail on Sunday, and Mail Online.
Now, their legal action claims to have compelling evidence of gross breaches of privacy by associated newspapers.
Now, the publisher has responded to those allegations. It's described them as preposterous smears.
Joining us now is the Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray. Hello. What do you make of this? Is this an attack on freedom of speech, or is it an attack on bad journalism?
Well, bear in mind that I am a journalist, so obviously my opinion is coloured somewhat. But these are extremely serious allegations, and they say they have compelling evidence. But the Mail refute them pretty strongly and call it a fishing exercise. To me, at a glance, and I haven't seen the compelling evidence, I don't think anyone has, outside of the people immediately involved in it. To me, this looks like a group of celebrities smelling blood. Prince Harry's had some victories. Prince Harry and Meghan have had victories against the Daily Mail, smelling blood and thinking we can do what Hacktoff did to the News of the World.
But you can't do it unless you've got evidence. I mean, that's the basis of all this. Why would you bring a claim unless you think you've got compelling evidence?
Well, we don't know, and perhaps they do have compelling evidence, but the Daily Mail seem adamant that it's a fishing exercise, and it could well be. It could be a kind of, if we just root around these stories, going back, up to 30 years, we will find that the Mail has done something and that, various associated papers have been guilty of misdemeanours. And I'm sure if you do enough fishing in any newspaper, going back far enough, you will find this.
But they're coming up with specifics of breaking into cars, bugging houses. I mean, it's not just
bugging landlines.
It's not just rooting through the bins, is it?
No, the allegations are very, very serious. And I think, what you get a lot of in a lot of these cases is extremely sort of serious allegations start with, and then it ends up being a minor infringement of privacy, which was the case with Meghan's victory over the Mail. But actually,
But it was a victory over the Mail.
It was a victory.
Wasn't
It was a victory, and in fact, they said, we now want to reshape tabloid culture. So maybe this is part of...
The Mail wants to.
No, Meghan and Harry.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. They're on a mission to
all right, but one of the names here is Doreen Lawrence.
That is a very interesting one.
Yes, Stephen Lawrence. Now, we know that the Mail ran a campaign to actually name the murderers of Stephen Lawrence. So in that way, you could say that they wrote a lot of stories that were entirely supportive of the Lawrence family at the time. However, they subsequently, I think you could say, wrote some pretty invasive pieces about the Lawrence marriage and things like that. We don't know what it's got to do with.
Well, the Mail take a lot of pride in their role in the Lawrence story, and they feel they're on the side of justice and racial justice. But the fact that she's in this suit is interesting, and it suggests that there's been some planning, and that it is, as the Mail said, an orchestrated attempt to embarrass them, and it's a PR drive to hurt them.
But they also said, and forgive me if I'm misquoting, but one of our guests earlier said that they described it as libelous.
Well, the Mail are saying it's libelous, yeah. Or slanderous, I think, yeah.
Slanderous. Well, look, but if it is slanderous and these claims prove to come to nothing, then these celebrities and Doreen Lawrence are in hot water, aren't they?
Well, there could be a countersuit, yeah. The thing is, celebrities increasingly think that they can shape the narratives about themselves through PR agents and so on. And to a large extent, they can. But what we're seeing now, particularly with some of the tabloids, is a desire to completely scrub anything they don't want from the papers. And when rich and powerful and famous people can do that increasingly, I think that leads to a very dangerous situation. So, again, as a biased journalist, I'm very much on the side of the papers.
No, but we're journalists as well, and we're not biased. I mean, journalists don't have to be biased, do they?
No, but I mean, I'm in favour of free speech. Yeah.
Well, and we all are, surely, but where
some people aren't.
But where journalism encroaches people's rights to privacy, and we saw that happen in the Hacked Off campaign.
Yes.
We saw time and again repeated stories of journalists just going too far, or private investigators going too far, being paid by journalists. It just went too far, and it was reprehensible behaviour. And if the Mail is guilty of reprehensible behaviour, then it should be called to account, shouldn't it?
Of course it should. But all these things fall under criminality.
And they may well do, mightn't
they?
And
if they do fall under criminality, they should be punished. And everybody who's sane agrees with that.
So just saying that these are celebrity names who are bringing this action doesn't sort of call into...
Well, it
doesn't devalue their case, does it?
And again, I haven't seen the compelling evidence, but to me, it looks like a group of celebrities getting together and thinking, let's go after the Daily Mail, because we've had a couple of victories over them on privacy. Now's the moment to strike.
Right.
It could just be, sorry, I was just going to say, it could not be just a group of celebrities. It may be a group of people, some of the biggest names happen to be celebrities, who can actually afford to pay good enough lawyers to bring this case.
It could well be. It could well be.
I mean, just because they're celebrities doesn't mean that their case is wrongful.
Well, all right. But I mean, I think they feel, a lot of people feel aggrieved at newspapers, and a lot of people don't like what's published about them. But I'm afraid that's the way it works in a free speech society.
No, not if it's untruthful and it's been gained illegally.
Well, if it's been gained illegally, then it can be convicted under criminal prosecution.
And that's why there's a case.
And that's why there is a case. If there is a case, we don't know that there is.
No, absolutely.
OK. Freddie, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
We are going to have to wait and see, aren't we, on that one, to see how or if it progresses.
Indeed.
As I say, the Associated Newspapers denying it, calling these preposterous claims, so we shall see. It is at 9:14. Let's bring you up to date with some of the headlines. The Prime Minister's ruled out launching an energy-saving public information campaign. That's despite warnings that planned blackouts could, it's a big could, hit the UK if power plants can't source enough gas to keep running. It's understood the Business Secretary supported the £15 million campaign, which could see households advised to turn off radiators, amongst other ideas. Apparently, that was blocked by Number 10.
Meanwhile, the government has opened a new licensing round for oil and gas exploration in the North Sea, first since 2019. As many as 100 licences could be granted. The Business Secretary, Jacob Rees-Mogg again, says it will boost the UK's economy, energy security and support skilled jobs.
Brad Pitt is expected to respond in court to allegations of abuse made by his former wife, Angelina Jolie. It follows a recent US legal filing by Jolie in which she claims Pitt was verbally and physically abusive towards her and their children in September 2016. Mr. Pitt's lawyer claims he's being misrepresented.
And retailers have seen their slowest sales growth since shops reopened after the COVID pandemic. A survey from advisory firm BDO says it's due to the worsening cost of living crunch, and it said total like-for-like sales in September increased by 2.8% year on year.
Now, the Prime Minister has called on European leaders to unite on energy and the economy amid the escalating Russian aggression.
Liz Truss also urged the group to address the fundamental causes of energy and migration challenges and strengthened her relationships with French President Emmanuel Macron, who she now calls a friend, as they announced plans to work together to tackle migration.
Oh, well, let's talk to former MEP and political campaigner Belinda de Lucy, who's here. Good morning to you.
Good morning, nice to see you.
Do you believe any of this entente cordiale which has been reignited?
I know, it's like a new dawn. Everyone's like, we're back, the family's back together again. I'm not quite sure. I think it was right that Liz Truss went. Very, very important to be open-minded about this new community that Macron is setting up. And I think it would have been very childish for the UK to have gone. And also it means that Liz can slightly shape what's going on there, because at the moment it has no real clear purpose apart from discussing migration, energy crisis and Putin. And it's had a few funny things said about it already. Eastern European diplomats called it a blah blah forum. Oh. So it's not just the UK that should be a little bit sceptical about what actual action can occur from these talking shops, but it is sort of thought about in the Eastern European circles that it could be just another kind of geopolitical blah blah chat shop with nothing really substantial coming.
But it could give Putin a few sleepless nights, couldn't it?
Well, this is what is great. We needed to unite. Russian aggression is an issue, and if we don't halt it now, then we are going to regret it in years to come. So I do think it was good of Liz Truss. We're one of Europe's biggest military powers to be there and do a talk and be very present as the UK. You know, can you believe it? We're able to have friendly relationships, you know, outside of the EU. This is 44 nations. 17 of them aren't in the EU, and they were all there, bar Russia and Belarus. So it's a very good sign against Putin. However, on migration, I have slight concerns because Macron and Liz Truss, they're not famous for their strong stands against illegal immigration or mass immigration. And I'm slightly concerned. They did mention they were going to work within the legal framework to tackle the migration climate.
That's fair enough, isn't it?
Well, not really. The European Court of Human Rights is exactly what stops us from deporting illegal immigrants, stops us from deporting failed asylum seekers.
But it doesn't stop the French from taking more action, from letting them get across the channel in the first place.
Well,
which presumably is what she's talking to Macron about. It's not about what happens when they get here. It's about stopping them getting here.
Yes, I'm not. I just my trust in Macron on this is not huge, and I don't think historically we should just go in blindly thinking this is the answer to all our prayers, because quite rightly, you know, Macron would be quite happy to get rid of all the camps in northern France and push them over to the UK. It solves a problem for him. Remember, Le Pen is on his heels with a lot of immigration talk, so he needs to act tough that he's doing something. I hope it's a new friendship. We've always had ups and downs, France and the UK, but you know, I'm French. I'm de Lucy, you know, from Normandy. So, well, I've been here a few centuries, but we have family history together. You know, we're close neighbours, and the EU actually stopped us from working properly together because there was so much distrust by that time. Now we can go in making our own way in Europe as an independent country. I just hope Liz Truss doesn't sign us up to anything that brings us back in.
No. I mean, truth is, yes, it was all very friendly and kissy-kissy yesterday, but we know that the jury is still out, as she said, on her relationship with Macron. Surely she couldn't and wouldn't give in to anything she didn't want.
True, she'll come under great pressure too, and I hope she's not swayed by the lights of the international stage. You know, once you're over there, ego schmoozing is quite a thing. But I think she's known for her resilience. She wasn't elected for her charisma. She was elected because she's stubborn and resilient and determined to see things through. And she hasn't compromised on the Northern Ireland Protocol, which was my worry, that the French would say, oh, sure, we'll do a deal on migration, but you need to hand us over Northern Ireland. So as long as she doesn't compromise on that, I'm optimistic optimistic, but cautious.
I mean, those
Fair enough.
pictures of the groups of them getting together and talking to each other and smiling at each other does at least give you some sort of feel-good factor.
Oh, it's so much better than the Boris-Macron years. You know, Macron called Boris a clown, and unfortunately that didn't help relationships. And I think they have some respect for Liz. And Liz is very much respected in Eastern Europe with her sort of moral stand against Putin very, very early on. And so they are liked. I mean, there was a huge round of applause when it was announced the UK was going to host one of these European political community meetings in 2024. We are well loved, and it's just exciting that as a Brexit nation, as an independent nation, we can still have these incredibly close, friendly relationships where we share our challenges.
I wonder when they're doing that group photograph, how they decide who's at the front.
Who's at the back? Yeah, Liz. I knew Liz would be at the back, but she was having a giggle. Yeah. It was really nice to see, very positive.
Would have been a bit cheeky to put us at the front, I think.
I think it might have been at the moment.
Belinda, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Maybe she'll work her way towards the front over the years.
Oh, I don't know if we want to, do we?
No, I'm with you.
No, stay at the back, Liz, stay at the back. Much more to come for you, including a great high street comeback.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Spell of heavy rain moving south through the day today. Either side of that, there'll be some sunny spells, but there'll be some gusty winds too. That spell of rain, courtesy of this weather front slowly sinking its way south. It's making for a pretty wet start out there this morning. Parts of southern Scotland and Northern Ireland, and fairly smartly spreading now into parts of northern England too. It's a fairly lively weather front, so some quite heavy bursts of rain, and it'll push into parts of North Wales, northwest England by the end of the morning. Behind that, brighter skies for eastern Scotland, plenty of showers for western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Further south, 1 or 2 showers, but much of East Anglia and the southeast will be dry for most of the day. Another pretty mild day here as well, despite the breeze 18 or 19. But this narrow band of rain pushes across the Midlands, southwest England later on. Not lasting too long, but it could be pretty intense, and it will be around across East Anglia and the southeast for this evening's rush hour. So just bear that in mind if you're heading away this Friday evening. It does clear through, and then many places having clear spells tonight. There'll be some showers keeping going in western Scotland, and some coming in from the Irish Sea into northwest England. But the winds ease off overnight as well. That will allow it to turn quite chilly, actually, a colder night than the one just gone. We're down into single figures for most to start the weekend. So a fresh start on Saturday, but by and large a sunny start. There will be through the day a few showers coming into western Scotland, maybe the odd one for Northern Ireland, northwest England too. But actually for most places, looking like a decent day tomorrow with sunny spells for the majority, and temperatures after a chilly start getting up to about average come the afternoon, generally into the teens. So the weekend mostly starting dry and fine, and certainly for most of England and Wales it will stay that way into Sunday as well. But we are looking at a change with outbreaks of rain coming into parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
It's 9:26, morning to you, watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Now, I don't know whether you know this, but the clothing label Karen Millen disappeared from the British High Street back in 2019. I didn't know this. Many critics wrote off the brand because it took its business online, apparently.
Ah, yes, but this week, the Princess of Wales, who wore a yellow Karen Millen dress to a maternity ward in Surrey, and the Prime Minister, who chose a... well, it's a red. It's more like a sort of rust, isn't it?
Yeah.
Karen Millen frock for the Tory party conference. Seems to have brought the fashion house back to life.
Or maybe they've got people who buy it off eBay for them, I don't know. Here to give us more insight into the brand is retail expert Teresa Wickham. Hello there.
Good morning.
What happened to Karen Millen? It was an enormous label, wasn't it?
It was. It originally started in Maidstone in 1981 with Karen and her husband buying a lot of sheeting and making white shirts. And then they built it up for them. And then they sold it to an Icelandic bank, actually. They sort of sold their brand. Then it had all the shops, and it's recently been bought for 18 million by Boohoo, which is entirely online.
Very different.
Oh,
yes.
18 million.
18
That's
million.
not a lot of money,
no,
really.
it's not huge, is it?
No, it's not. And the awful thing is that she can't use her name again.
What happened then? I mean, I remember Karen Millen. Funnily enough, I thought it was a New York name because that's where I first went into one of their shops, I think.
Yes.
And everybody wore Karen Millen, and it was the very tailored look. It was very 80s, 90s, you know, the well-dressed woman look. And expensive. So it was the talk of the town for a while. So what went wrong?
People just didn't buy it. They didn't have the right products, the right designs. I mean, it's really interesting that the Mail picked that up, that they were there on the same day. I mean, there's a Kate factor, and that will have driven that dress completely out of it.
So why is Kate wearing Karen Millen? I mean, who's advising her to do it? Well, she looks good. She'd look good in anything, frankly.
If you had a figure like that, then you'd look good in anything. But she has, I mean, she's a busy lady, so she has somebody who will select and buy clothes or get them sent in and try them on, and then they'll work together and see if it's like that. She's not the only person who does it in that way. You'll find, I can think of a very famous cook on television who has somebody to help her buy her outrageous outfits. So, you know, that's the thing they need. And
so if one person is... Sorry, I'm sorry, my dear.
No, sorry.
I was going to say, if there's one person, because you always wonder who these fashion advisors are, who's advising Kate, that suits you, you look good in it, and Catherine obviously feels confident in that sort of look, then they go back and they buy more.
Well, they go back, but also she tries to support British designers. And so there'll be a set that'll come in, and sometimes she'll wear a dress that's bought 2 years ago, which is totally frustrating for people who
then want to buy the same thing.
That. But I think what about this particular style and dress, I mean, they vary, and Liz Hurley's now got involved, and she's designing a collection for them.
For Karen Millen?
For Karen Millen, yes, under the Boohoo, you know, they're doing it like that. They've also bought Coast. But the thing is, at the end of the day, people are looking now for something that is quite professional looking, but a bit feminine, you know. So that's the idea. I don't suggest it be right for you, but, you know, that's what they're looking for. And it's not that expensive if you're working and you know that you can wear it to work and then you can wear it out in the evening and you can keep using it.
There's a campaign going on then. I mean, if they're tying in Liz Hurley, they're making sure that there's items going to the Prime Minister and to the Princess of Wales. All that sort of. It seems like an actual campaign to get them back and recognised again.
That's what a lot of people will do, and they'll get lots of parcels.
And it's working.
Things like that. Yes, it's working. And I think the other thing too is the Prime Minister's wife wore one to the funeral, but she rented it. So there's a growth in renting. I mean, years ago, if you had to go to a corporate ball or something, you'd rent a ball gown or ascot, you rent a thing like that. Now people are renting dresses for everyday events.
But what's interesting is you saying that Karen Millen now doesn't own the right to her name anymore.
No.
This has happened time and again. I was talking to Elizabeth Emmanuel just a short while ago. She no longer has the right to her name and is fighting to get it back.
Well, Joe Malone.
Joe Malone, yes.
Owned by Estée Lauder.
Good Lord.
You know, and people still think it's Jo Malone, but it's quite frightening for her. But she's launched another brand called Jo Loves. But it's when you set up something and use your own name, you have to think long term. Are you going to stay with it? Are you going to sell it out? Because the brand that you spend all your investment in is where the value is.
Interesting.
Fascinating, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, there you go. Teresa, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Don't go anywhere. We've got plenty more to come for you, including an update on the big fight tomorrow night at the O2.
It's not
been
happening.
cancelled.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Now, this weekend's blockbuster boxing clash between Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn has been, well, postponed, to put it politely, after Benn tested positive for a banned substance. The fight, which was meant to carry on the rivalry of their fathers in the 90s, was called off by the British Boxing Board of Control. Paul Coit is here with me in the studio. I mean, dear me. I mean, this was so highly anticipated, but it's some very odd drug involved, isn't it?
It really is. And the thing is, we're talking the positive test as far as Conor Benn's concerned, and also there was a lot of argument before that because it's something called catch weight, which means that the two fighters are not at the same weight. One's going to have to lose weight, one's going to have to put on weight, whereas you've got the situation with Chris Eubank Jr., the fact that he is having to lose weight for the fight automatically puts him on the back foot because he loses power, he's losing strength and speed and agility and fit, anything. Yeah. So it's all, and this is the reason Chris Eubank, of course, his famed father, who fought Nigel Benn over the years, and he didn't want anything to do with the fight because he was very worried about his son. But now we end up with a positive drugs test as well on top of that.
It's controversy. Should we get some expert opinion?
I think we're talking Spencer Oliver.
Yes. Yeah.
I think Spencer Oliver's going to join us. Excellent boxing pundit and the perfect man to try and make some sense out of all of this. Spencer, it's great to see you. I've been speaking about it with Stephen and also all week about the whole situation and what's been going on. But What does it mean for boxing? I mean, it just leaves boxing and everybody with a pretty nasty taste in their mouth, doesn't it?
Paul, it certainly does. Good morning, by the way, to both of you. But yeah, it certainly does, Paul. It puts a real grey area over our sport, you know, a sport that we're trying to clean up, keep as clean as possible. And this fight, a fight of this magnitude, you know, we talk about the rivalry of the Bens and the Eubanks that goes back over 30 years. It was a fantasy fight that none of us thought we would ever get, and we got it. You know, Conor Benn was moving up in weight and trying the impossible, really, against Chris Eubank Jr., who was being brought down in weight. He was being brought down, to explain to you guys, the weight was made at a catch rate of 157. And Chris Eubank boxes at 160, Conor Benn boxes at 147. So it was an unrealistic weight, if I'm totally honest, for Chris Eubank Jr. to make. It was a weight where it was dangerous for him to sort of try and attempt to make that sort of weight. And Conor Benn now, you know, this has come to light, and he's failed this drugs test for this fertility drug, a woman's fertility drug that increases testosterone levels, which means that it will improve his performance, increase his power. So that was really worrying. It's alarming that they was trying to hold Eubank Jr. to a weight where he was going to be very weak. And on the flip side, Ben was using this performance-enhancing drug to better his chances, may I say it. But, you know, it puts a dark light on the sport, because, you know, we don't need any of that in our sport. A fight of this magnitude, it was a fight that everybody was looking forward to. We love the build-up. We love the history of it. And unfortunately, it's been tarnished by this. And I like Conor Benn. I like him a lot. I've watched him develop as a person and as a boxer. And I just feel really heartbroken that he's gone and done something like this. It's, you know, because I wouldn't have thought that he was the last person on the planet that I thought would actually have done something as stupid as this. And it's going to be hard for him to recover.
He denies it, though, Spencer, doesn't he? He denies it. And we haven't had the B sample back yet.
Guys, let me tell you, the A sample and the B sample are from the same sample. So they're just separated into...
Oh, he's gone.
We seem to have lost him. I think he's saying that the A sample and the B sample, it comes from the same batch. So I think hopefully we get Spencer back in just a second. So the same batch, they test both just in case the A sample had been tampered with or something. I mean, but the chances that a sample is going to come in contact with a fertility drug, it's very, very unlikely. So now we've got to work out what happens from here and what happens to Conor Benn, because if that's positive, then we're going to be looking at a ban, and there's absolutely no chance that this fight is going to go ahead after that, by the look of things.
No. Have we got Spencer back? Oh, we do. I mean, Paul was, I don't know if you heard, Paul was just saying there's no chance, really, that this fight will ever take place. And as you say, it was such a, I mean, a bit of a show fight, but what everyone was looking forward to.
It's almost doomed from the start, isn't it, Spencer? I mean, even from everything, it's one of those things that it's almost meant not to happen.
Yeah, it's a shame, it really is, because, guys, look, I never thought this fight was going to happen. I grew up watching Eubank Senior and Nigel Benn. You know, that was sort of like, they were my inspirations into the sport. Like, watching their rivalries was incredible. And now I went to the press conference when Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn had announced the fight, and it was like watching their dads back 30 years ago. You know, the personalities were exactly the same. And I thought, you know what, we're going to have a bit of fun with this. It's going to be good for the sport. It's going to capture the imagination of the people. And it has now, but for the wrong reasons. I'm just devastated, really, that this has happened at a time when boxing's going so well. You know, I'm up in Sheffield working on a predominantly women's boxing show here today, actually, that's going out on iPlayer tonight on the BBC, and it's the first time the BBC have been involved in boxing for years, you know, because all the networks want to come back into the sport. So I'm up here doing this show, and then this has happened, and it's such a shame, because the boxing's going from strength to strength, and this just puts a really grey area over it.
I'll ask you that. I have one question, though, about Conor. We have seen boxers, we've seen Canelo Alvarez have positive tests, we've seen Tyson Fury have positive tests. Now, if ever there's a sport, surely, where you want it to be 100% clean, it's going to be something as dangerous as boxing. So what happens now, do you think, to Conor Benn, should it prove that it is positive and that he was guilty of it?
Well, listen, there's only one thing, and it's hard for me to say this because I like Conor, he's a mate, and I like him as a mate, but I'm talking now for the good of the sport, that if he comes back positive,
Spencer, got to leave it there. Good to talk to you. Thank you very much
Always
indeed.
good to talk to you guys.
I tell you what, I wouldn't want to get into a fight with Spencer, or even a fight with you, Paul.
No, both of us are extremely nice, and he's nicer than I am, and you wouldn't want to get into a fight with him, yeah.
No, I might tell you the other thing I'd be taking is a paracetamol afterwards.
OK, sorry to ban substance, though. I'm not taking that either. Well, it is maybe for now.
It probably is. Paul, thank you very much
Pleasure, have a good
indeed.
weekend. Thank you.
Now, 10,000 jobs could be created in Nottinghamshire during the development of the world's first commercial nuclear fusion power plant. The coal-fired site at West Burton was picked for the conversion with the promise of a £200 million investment and billions more for the future economy. Our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, has more.
For half a century, the Midlands has been the source of much of Britain's energy. Now it will guide the world into a future of clean electricity. West Burton in Nottinghamshire has been picked for the first fusion power station. Ben Bradley is the leader of the county council and a local MP.
Colleagues in Parliament in particular have been messaging me in the last few days where their area has been on the shortlist and how disappointed they are to have missed out on it. So, we're delighted to have it here, and it has a huge impact on the local community too, with skills and jobs and opportunities for the future.
The government's commitment to Bassett Law here in Notts comes with a £200 million promise initially. Afterwards, up to $20 billion for the regional economy, plus 10,000 jobs. Bassett Law's MP, Brendan Clark-Smith, says this is levelling up in action.
This is on a different scale, and this is something that is going to be globally significant, and it really puts Bassett Law on the map. We're maybe world famous for Robin Hood in these parts, but I think now we're going to be world famous for nuclear fusion.
Fusion technology copies the reaction that powers the sun. Scientists have studied it for decades, and this leap forward could help humanity leave fossil fuels in the past.
High quality employment and growth in this region.
Ian is chief exec of the UK Atomic Energy Authority.
It's sustainable, it's continuous, you don't wait for the wind to blow and the sun to shine. So it has all this really attractive features, but it's really hard, and we haven't yet shown that we can do it. That's why this is so important, because it's going to show that we can do it.
These cooling towers have been on Nottinghamshire's skyline for 60 years. People have built their homes and their families around them. Soon they'll be demolished, yet the promise of nuclear fusion means that for many years to come, the mass production of energy will continue to play a role in the life of people who live here. Dave has lived in the village next to West Burton for 20 years. He says the community has welcomed the news.
We're so used to having it, and it's been good for the population here. Many of the residents actually work at EDF, and I'm sure many of them will continue with their children to work in the new projects.
The world is caught in an energy crisis. The climate is changing, while Putin restricts gas as a weapon of war. Fusion is still firmly in the future. This site won't open until 2040. But it puts Britain at the spark of a new industrial revolution. Will Hollis for GB News in Bassett Law.
Now, the Oscar-winning actor Kevin Spacey appeared in a New York court yesterday to defend himself in a sexual assault lawsuit. The actor Anthony Rapp, best known for his role in the musical Rent, and also in some Star Trek stuff actually, was a minor when the alleged sexual misconduct took place at a party in 1986. Well, let's get some of the details. Our very own Stephanie Tetchy is here. Morning, Stephanie.
Morning, Stephen.
I mean, he was actually only recently in court in the UK, wasn't he? So now in New York. I mean, this is we've talked about this for a long time, but it's now coming to an
It
head.
is actually coming to an head for Kevin Spacey with all these cases, alleged cases that have been coming out. So this case actually happened 36 years ago in Manhattan at an alleged party he threw, and the claimant is saying that he was seduced by Kevin Spacey inappropriately. When this first came out, it came out in 2017, which was around the time where the Me Too movement was happening. So a lot of people were talking about past cases that happened. At the time, Kevin Spacey said he had no recollection of it. He said if he did behave like that, he apologised and he must have been drunk and it was inappropriate behaviour. But now the case has come out, his lawyers have said actually Rapp did not attend the party and it's all false accusations. And they said it's kind of a bit hard to refer to what this actually is, because they're saying actually if he did pin him down to a bed and he just had a bit of a wiggle, that's not actually sexual advancement. So at the moment, this case will go in for the next 2 weeks. But this case was really the demise of Kevin's career, because after that, he faced further allegations on House of Cards, which he was eventually let go of, and he had to pay a $28 million lawsuit to them for his inappropriate behaviour. And as we mentioned earlier, he came to London earlier this year, where he's facing 4 counts of sexual assault during his time when he was artistic director at the Young Vic Theatre. So this is really all coming ahead for Kevin Spacey.
And of course, as is always the case, we've got to let these cases follow through and come to whatever conclusions they do. But I mean, this is a man who was so huge in the industry, who, as you say, his career has just absolutely collapsed.
It's tanked. And, you know, this is what the Me Too movement did to Hollywood. It exposed all these different cases. I know a lot of people are saying, why are people talking now? But before Me Too, there was really a culture of hushness in Hollywood where people didn't feel brave enough or confident to talk about this. But in all these cases, it's always, you know, not guilty until proven wise in the court. So a lot of these cases, Kevin says he wants to clear his name. But the thing is, whether he can actually get his career back, regardless what happens, is yet to be seen, and it will be quite difficult because he's had so many of these cases which are now coming up.
Yeah, it is very difficult. I'll tell you what was quite interesting with him, though. It was only 18 months, 2 years ago, and he released on Twitter a sort of cameo of his role in House of Cards. Yeah. Didn't it? Which, again, people were looking at and said, well, why has he done this? He hasn't got a role in the show anymore. See, it seemed like he was trying to stage some sort of comeback.
Well, that's the thing. When you've had like a 40-plus year career in Hollywood and it goes overnight, what do? You're used to being an actor, and, you know, there's some people who will sit on the fence with these cases and they'll be like, no, actually, he's a beloved actor. We don't know what happened. We don't know if this happened. And he still will have fans who wants to see him performing. And, you know, I've seen it many times in Hollywood where people are trying to resurrect the career, but it's hard to move past these allegations. At the moment, Rapp is actually trying to sue him for $40 million for mental and emotional distress, loss of work and medical expenses.
Right. Oh, well, we shall follow that case as it goes on. In the meantime, let's talk about another case, isn't there?
Yeah.
Excuse me. With Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. I mean, Angelina Jolie has made allegations about what happened in their marriage. Yeah. But again, these date back quite some time.
2016.
But Brad Pitt's now saying he's going to have to take this to court.
Yeah, his representative has now come out and denied claims that Angelina said that he was physically and verbally abusive to his children. Being specifically, she said that he choked one of their children, also assaulted her. These claims are not new, Stephen. They came out in 2016 when the marriage dissolved. But the police at the time, they refused to complain, said they weren't going to look into it any further. Brad has actually been taking Angelina to court over their winery, Chateau in south of France that they have. And Brad was quite annoyed because she sold her stake in it. So during this case, that's where she's brought this case up again. And a representative for Brad has said, well, it's just rehashing things that are harmful to the family, and he's denied it. So, again, I don't know where this case will go, but it's clear that Angelina does not want to let let this alleged assault go.
So now, this whole, what do we know? What happens now with this? Is he then taking her to court over these allegations?
Well, no, he's not taking her to court over these allegations. He's currently taking her to court over this chateau because she sold her stake to a Russian oligarch, which he's now accusing her of undermining him. So the case at hand is actually not to do with these allegations, but for her selling the chateau. But she's now bringing this evidence up, and it's yet to be seen whether the courts will be taking this seriously.
Right. Wow. Oh, well, I know you're going to keep a close eye on all of that for us, and loads of show. We've got loads of showbiz tomorrow.
Yes, there is, and it's just Hollywood for you. It's all lights and glamour, but then there's always the other side to Hollywood, which is quite dark.
Isn't it, Joss? Now, look, we've been talking all morning, and, well, for weeks, as you know, about cost of living crisis, all this concern now about how we preserve our energy and all the rest of it. Lots of good tips coming through. Valerie says, morning, Valerie, one tip I have in the morning is I boil a full kettle for my morning tea and then fill a flask with the rest of the boiled water, so it sorts out coffee later on without having to put the kettle on again, which is probably quite a good tip.
It is.
But what are you doing?
So I know...
Are you very conscious of the energy crisis?
I really am. I think as soon as it turned October 1st, I was like, it's a new day, it's a new chapter.
It's a new energy bill.
It's a new energy bill. So actually, Stephen, I know we were talking about on the show, I've been on a hunt for an air fryer. That is because I think that will help a lot, because I like cooking things in the oven, so I've said nope. Also putting the heating on for only like minimal time, so I won't keep it on for the whole night. And there's a lot of TikTok videos of people showing how you can beat these new energy price hikes. So things like taking your plugs out of the sockets, making sure the TV's off, because I keep the TV on overnight. That's now no longer happening for me. So, and of course, it's also being quite savvy with what I'm spending my money on. There's no more Karen Millen dresses for me at the moment.
No, I bet. But isn't it interesting, because we're all having to, and, there are a lot of people who are really struggling in life, and then there are those of us who are, doing a bit better. But everyone is paying attention to this now. No one is wanting to waste a penny because we just don't know where it's going to go.
And you know what's really sad about this? I feel like we've almost taken it for granted in the sense of how we were living before. And I just feel like the last 2 years have been really intense. The pandemic, Ukraine, and now energy bills. I don't think no one's ever talking about the mental health side of things, how it is for people out there thinking they're strapped for cash, and it's all this stuff going on. So it's quite sad, but we're all in it together.
It is. Now, am I right in thinking you're not a home owner?
Oh my gosh, no, I'm not. I'm actually looking to be a first-time buyer, and I was lucky to have got my application in on the last day before all the banks took their products off the market.
Oh, really? So you're still within that?
I'm still within it, but most of your advisors that you've had on the show, I do think to myself, is it actually worth pursuing? Is it still worth trying to get a home during this time? Because I have the comforts of being at home, and I'm like, once I bark out on my own, and I've got this house which I have to pay for the next 30 years, and I don't know where the economy is going, it's quite scary.
It is scary. It's a big jump, isn't it? And Malcolm in Carlisle, morning to you, Malcolm, said when base rates were at 0.25%, rates were only ever going to go one way.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. We've got, even when you've got a mortgage, but when you're shopping about for a mortgage, you get used to these rates being very, very low. And of course, the minute they go up, you've got less money to spend on the actual property.
And it just makes you tighten your purse strings, and it just leaves you in this constant state of anxiety. And you shouldn't be feeling like this when you're about to go for your first home. It should be quite an exciting time, but I kind of feel like my generation has been robbed a bit. But then I speak to older people who've said, back in the day, it used to be like 10%. So that was just a normal price. So it just seems like everything's been quite cyclical in that sense.
We've got used to money being cheap.
Yes.
I think so. We've only got a minute left. I wanted to ask you about do you ever miss an appointment with the doctors or anything? Do you think people should be taken off the waiting lists if they do?
Yes, I do think they should, because I think it's so hard to get an appointment these days. Even if I'm trying to get to my doctor now, it's taken over a month or so. And so I think they're got like gold dust now. So if you're not appreciating it or adhering or sticking to an appointment you have, that could be someone else who has a condition which needs looking to. So we can't take things like that for granted.
You see, Stephanie Tetchy. Ladies and gentlemen, voice of reason.
I do try, Stephen. I do try.
Oh, joy to see you, as always. Look forward to a good old chinwag tomorrow.
I'll be back tomorrow.
Looking forward to that. Stephanie, thank you very much indeed. Keep your thoughts coming through, won't you? Throughout the day here on GB News. GB Views at gbnews.uk. CJ, you know what it is. Thank you for your company this morning. Me, Anne, Stephanie and Aidan will be back tomorrow morning. But up next, it's Friday morning with Esther and Phil.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Spell of heavy rain moving south through the day today. Either side of that, there'll be some sunny spells, but there'll be some gusty winds too. That spell of rain, courtesy of this